My name is Melissa, and my husband, Paul, is a light novel writer and a freelancer. He takes on various writing jobs, and I help him as a secretary in his private office. I was working with my husband as usual when I noticed it was 3 p.m. I thought about taking a break, but before I could, the front door slammed open. Both Paul and I looked upset. The person who entered was Paul's older sister, Donna. She's supposed to live at our parents' house, but for some reason, she comes over every day at 3 p.m., drinks tea, eats all the snacks we've gotten as gifts, and leaves. I was in the middle of working, but she barged in. "It's fine, right? I want my tea," she said. I was getting really annoyed. Who are you talking to like that? I thought. Donna flopped down on the couch, crossed her legs, and started eating our snacks loudly. "Tea, quick," she demanded. It was unbelievable. Donna was so rude and acted like the world revolved around her. She claimed to be a live streamer, but I wasn't sure how much she actually earned or how much of her work was real. She also said she worked from home. "Hey, you're my sister-in-law. Make me some tea," Donna ordered. She was treating me like a maid. Because of her attitude, our parents had scolded her before, but that was always the end of it. I didn't let it bother me much. I've known her since high school, so this wasn't new. "Do it yourself," I replied. "Huh? Don't talk back to me," she shouted. As she did, snacks flew out of her mouth and onto the floor. "Don't talk back. I'm the oldest daughter here. You need to listen to me. If you don't like it, get a divorce," she snapped. I was really angry at that comment, but the first to get frustrated was Paul. "That's enough. You're being a nuisance. Get out," he shouted. "What? Wait. Donna yelled as Paul stood up, grabbed her arm, and dragged her out of the room. She kept yelling, but Paul wasn't done yet. "If you come here using the spare key again, I won't forgive you. I'll tell Mom and Dad," Paul said, making sure Donna could hear him. At the front door, Donna was still whining, and Paul locked the door so she couldn't come back in. He quickly called our dad. "Hello, Dad, Donna came over again," he said. Wait a minute," Donna protested from the other side of the door. "My name is Melissa, and my husband, Paul, is a light novel writer and freelancer who takes on various writing jobs. I help him as his secretary in his private office. I was working with Paul as usual when I noticed it was 3 p.m. I was thinking about taking a break when suddenly, the sound of the front door slamming open echoed through the room. Paul and I both frowned. The person who entered was Paul's older sister, Donna. She's supposed to be living at our parents' house, but for some reason, she comes over every day at 3 p.m. She drinks tea, eats all the snacks we've gotten as gifts, and then leaves. I was still in the middle of work. "It's fine, right? I want my tea," Donna said casually. I couldn't believe it. This was really annoying. Who are you talking to like that? I thought, feeling frustrated. Donna plopped herself down on the couch, crossed her legs, and started eating our snacks loudly. "Tea, quick," she demanded. It was unbelievable. Donna acted so entitled, like the world should revolve around her. She claimed to be a live streamer, but I had no idea how much money she actually made. She also said she worked from home. "Hey, you're my sister-in-law. Make me some tea," Donna ordered. It felt like she was treating me like a maid. My in-laws have scolded her for this behavior before, but it never lasts. I wasn't surprised, though, since she's always been like this. I've known Donna since high school. "Do it yourself," I said, irritated. "Huh? Don't talk back to me," she yelled. At the same time, snacks flew out of her mouth and onto the floor. "Don't talk back. I'm the oldest daughter, and you should listen to me. If you don't like it, get a divorce," she snapped. I was really angry at that comment, but it was Paul who got frustrated first. "Enough, you're a nuisance. Get out," he shouted. "What? Wait, Donna protested as Paul stood up, grabbed her arm, and dragged her out of the room. She was still making a fuss, but Paul wasn't done. "If you use the spare key to come in again, I won't forgive you. I'm telling Mom and Dad," he said, making sure Donna could hear him. Outside the door, Donna kept whining, but Paul quickly locked the door to stop her from coming back in. He immediately called our dad. "Hello, Dad, Donna came over again," Paul said. Wait a minute," Donna shouted from outside. "I want to make sure your parents have a good time. Let's bring up the issue when the timing's right." "Yeah, let's do that. By the way, what kind of restaurant did you choose?" I printed out some options. Want to take a look? Okay, let's see them. I showed Paul the list of restaurants I had picked out. Since Paul had been working so hard, I wanted to be helpful in this situation. For the celebration, I planned to let his parents choose from the options I'd narrowed down. A week later, we pressed the intercom button at Paul's parents' house, but no one answered. That's odd. Mom and Dad should be home, Paul said. Oh, their car is missing. Maybe they went out shopping, or maybe they're buying things for our visit. Well, it doesn't matter. Let's just go in and wait. Paul used the house key to open the door. As we stepped inside, we heard hurried footsteps coming from the second floor. Donna, Paul's sister, came rushing down the stairs with a noisy clatter. Why didn't you answer the intercom? Donna shouted. Hello, sister-in-law, I said, as usual, with a polite but distant greeting. But there was something else behind Donna's sudden rush downstairs. You two set up everything for Mom and Dad's 60th birthday celebration, right? Donna asked. Yes, that's right. Why? Where is it? Show me. Huh? You said you weren't going to attend. I changed my mind. Show it to me. Paul showed her the details, and Donna grabbed the papers from him roughly. Wow, the great writer, huh? You must be doing so well. You picked such a fancy restaurant, Donna sneered, looking at the information Paul had printed. What's your problem? Paul snapped. Stop saying things like that. Why not? You must be making a lot of money, right? Just so you know, I'm making more than you, Donna replied with a smug smile. Donna always says things to put Paul down. If she really is earning multiple times his income, she must make over $100,000 a year, but there's no proof of this. Also, it was me, Melissa, who chose the restaurant. Okay, can you stop being so rude? I said to Donna. Donna suddenly stared at me intensely, making me feel uncomfortable. I pulled back and asked, what is it? Then, Donna said something outrageous. Here we go, Paul, now you've finally seen this woman's true colors, haven't you? She said with a smirk. What? Paul said, confused. Whatever, I'm looking forward to the celebration. See ya, Donna said, forcefully pushing both of us out of the entrance. For some reason, she took the restaurant document with her, creating more drama. Well, it's okay, we can just print out the details again later, and we can show the photos to my parents when we meet them, I said, trying to stay calm. It turned out that our in-laws had forgotten about our visit that day and had gone to a Sunday farmers market. They apologized later, and after finalizing the restaurant, we made the reservation. The day of the 60th birthday celebration arrived. Everyone was to meet at the restaurant. Donna and our parents arrived before us. We had an awkward moment with Donna, but we tried not to focus on it. However, when Donna looked at me with a smug smile, I couldn't shake the bad feeling it gave me. Despite that, we went into the restaurant and were shown to a private room. It was a traditional Japanese-style room, much more beautiful than the pictures online. As my father-in-law and mother-in-law were admiring the room and about to say something, Donna suddenly spoke up from behind us, grinning. Don't let yourselves get full, Dad and Mom, she said, mischievously. Then, Donna pointed at me and yelled, You're after our family's wealth, aren't you? Everyone was shocked, not just me, but also Paul, my father-in-law, and my mother-in-law. Wealth? What are you talking about? I had no idea what was going on. Are you crazy? We're just an ordinary middle-class family, Paul snapped at Donna. But Donna wasn't done. As the eldest daughter, I'm going to inherit this house. You're trying to target my parents too, aren't you? I won't let you fool me, she yelled. I really don't understand what you mean. Why would I do something like that? I asked, confused. I was completely confused and tried to ask Donna a question, but she didn't seem interested in answering. I've seen through you from the start, Donna said. You're a dangerous woman. You've gotten close to Paul, and this proves it. No way, Paul said. We've been dating since high school. If she wanted to marry someone rich, she would have married someone else. Donna just snickered at Paul's disbelief and started boasting. Normally, a woman who isn't after money wouldn't pick such expensive restaurants. Look at this list. All of these places are expensive, Donna said, handing over the documents she had taken from Paul a few days ago. So what? Paul asked, confused. Don't you get it? Donna sneered. This woman thinks she can do whatever she wants with your wealth. Men are so simple. Donna laughed, not noticing how hopeless the situation was becoming. I won't let her take our family's wealth. Paul, you understand now, right? This woman's true nature is showing. She's a nuisance. You should get a divorce, Donna said loudly. This is an order from your eldest sister. For the peace of the family, you should divorce her. Get out now, and don't ever come near my parents again. Donna yelled at me, but that's when Paul stepped in between us. What the hell are you talking about? Apologize to Melissa right now, Paul shouted. Wait, Dad, what's all this about money? This is ridiculous, Paul's father said, clearly confused. Melissa has been helping us set up the 60th birthday celebration. You should be helping, too, instead of doing something so stupid. No, Dad, look at this. Donna flustered and quickly handed the documents to her father. My father-in-law glanced over the papers. If you look at this, you'll understand, Donna said. She's picked incredibly expensive places for the celebration. She's trying to drain all our family's money, and it'll come from you and Mom, right? I'm not wrong, am I? My father-in-law sighed deeply. Paul, my mother-in-law, and I were all speechless. Huh? You think we're paying for the celebration? Paul's father asked, still confused. Donna's eyes widened in surprise. Of course, it would be a bit too much to have the person being celebrated pay for it. But wait, so this woman is still spending Paul's money however she pleases? Donna said, still acting like she was right. See, I was right all along. What are you talking about? Paul said, clearly upset. Melissa is working with me. You know my salary is also hers. There's no reason for anyone to complain about it. But, Donna said, turning to her mother for support. Mom, don't you agree? Donna asked, trying to escape the situation. My mother-in-law stood there quietly, then spoke up. Listen, she began. All the places on this list have memories of your father and me. Melissa specifically asked us about the places we have memories of. She wanted to find a nice restaurant for us. Based on that, Donna was stunned. The disrespectful things you've been saying are really shameful, my mother-in-law said, her voice shaking. Donna finally realized that her guesses and assumptions were wrong, but it was already too late to fix her mistakes. She was about to face the consequences of her actions. You've really messed up, my father-in-law said. You don't need to stay with us anymore. Go home. Wait a minute, Dad, why are you being so harsh? I'm your daughter. You can't just kick me out, Donna protested. But you were planning to not even show up, weren't you? Paul replied. Don't worry about the cancellation fee. I'll take care of it. Donna tried to argue, but my father-in-law continued. It seems we raised you wrong. We let you have your way, but now we've reached our limit. Leave the house. It's for the best. Don't make decisions without consulting me, my mother-in-law added. What do you think, Paul and Melissa? With a smile that was almost terrifying, my mother-in-law spoke cheerfully, while Donna looked at us with teary eyes, like she was begging for help. I was told by your older sister not to get involved, I said calmly. No, this is about my parents, Donna cried. Is that so? Then I'll keep my distance, my mother-in-law said. Please leave. Donna tried to grab me, but my father-in-law stepped in between us. Go home, he said sternly. Donna looked at him and shrank back. She quickly left the restaurant. We were able to finish the birthday celebration for my in-laws and enjoy our meal in peace. When we got home, it seemed Donna had been sulking at the house. My father-in-law repeated that she should leave. Donna cried and made a scene, so they started thinking about sending her to a rehab facility. I'm not sick, Donna shouted as she disappeared somewhere. Later, we heard that Donna found a job with a dormitory, but she couldn't keep it and kept changing jobs and addresses. Meanwhile, Paul and I continued working hard every day. Our relationship with my in-laws was excellent, and we enjoyed their company. Although we were a little concerned about what happened to Donna, we knew we didn't want to deal with her selfishness ever again. I just wanted to keep supporting my husband so he could focus more on his work.
Hi, I'm Jacob. I'm really nervous today because I'm about to do something very important. I'm going to Sarah's house to ask her to marry me. Sarah and I were classmates when we were younger, and we started dating again after meeting at a school reunion 6 months ago. We're both older now, in our 30s, and we've been talking about our future a lot. Sarah has been talking about getting married, and although it made me a bit nervous, I also thought it might be a good idea, so we decided to get married. I feel bad that I didn't propose to Sarah in a proper way. We decided to get married quickly without much planning. Just a few days ago, we finally decided that I would ask her formally at her house. I haven't met Sarah's parents since we started dating, but I remember seeing her dad once when we were in middle school, probably at a parent-teacher meeting or a school event. He seemed serious and focused on education, which impressed me. My own dad passed away when I was young, and he was more laid back. So seeing Sarah's dad being so involved stuck with me. He seemed like a serious person. I'm worried about what Sarah's dad will think when he learns we decided to get married so quickly and without a proper proposal. He might think our relationship of only 6 months is too short. The more I think about it, the more nervous I get. I had a hard time sleeping last night, and this morning I struggled to eat breakfast. My mom noticed and looked concerned. I told her I was going to introduce her to my girlfriend soon, but I didn't mention it's Sarah yet. I want to surprise her. My parents were also classmates in middle school, so I think she'll be happy to hear that my future wife is also a classmate. After my dad passed away, my family faced financial struggles, and I had to start working right after finishing middle school. My mom really helped me stay on track during that tough time. She's always positive, never speaks badly about others, and keeps a hopeful attitude, which has rubbed off on me. She doesn't ask much about my love life, probably because she knows I'm busy, but I want to reassure her. That's why I need today's meeting to go well. I'm feeling really nervous, like I might get a stomach ulcer. But seeing how anxious I am, my mom gave me a reassuring pat on the back and said, "You've got this, son." She's right. I can't afford to be weak now. I need to gather my courage. With that in mind, I made my way to Sarah's house. When I got there, Sarah greeted me at the door and welcomed me inside. "Come on in, my parents are waiting," Sarah said, which made me feel really nervous. When I stepped into the living room, Sarah's parents were sitting on the couch, smiling at me. "We're glad you're here. We've been waiting," they said warmly, and suddenly I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't as intimidating as I had feared. They seemed friendly and welcoming, and I started to think this meeting might turn out okay. After introducing myself, Sarah's mom brought out some tea. "Thank you," I said gratefully. "I didn't know you went to middle school with Sarah," I exclaimed, surprised. "Were you ever in the same class as her?" she inquired. I explained that we hadn't shared a class, but Sarah had approached me at the school reunion. "Oh, I understand. But I should remember you if you were a top student, even from a different class," she pondered, resting her hand on her cheek, looking puzzled. Before I could respond, Sarah interjected with a laugh. "Jacob wasn't exactly a star student, was he? Always pretty average, right?" I wish Sarah hadn't been so blunt, but it was too late. I glanced at Sarah's mom and saw her looking at me with an unreadable expression. Sarah's comment changed the mood in the room. What was once a pleasant atmosphere turned heavy and silent. After an awkward pause, Sarah's dad spoke up. "Which college did you attend?" "I never went to college. In fact, I didn't even finish high school. I had started working right after middle school." I was planning to be honest about my past when suddenly, a cup of tea flew towards me before I could finish my sentence. At the same time, there was a shout. "Don't lie to me. Sarah told me you were a CEO, but you're just a dropout who's been working since middle school. How can I trust someone like you to run a company? You're just riding on the startup trend and you'll fail soon, mark my words." Sarah's dad glared at me, shocked. He grabbed my collar and demanded, "What's your real motive? Are you trying to take advantage of me because I'm an executive at a big company?" I tried desperately to explain, but he wouldn't listen. "I can't trust someone who didn't finish high school." "You don't belong here. Get out," he yelled, pushing me away and throwing a teacup at me. I couldn't even clear up the misunderstanding or calm him down. He kicked me and I fell to the ground. Sarah and her mom just watched, not intervening. Then everything went black. He flipped the dining table and I tried to dodge, but it hit my foot. The pain was intense and I couldn't help but groan. "Stop overreacting. It can't hurt that much," Sarah's dad scoffed. Even Sarah joined in, saying, "You're so weak for a man. This is pathetic." I knew I had to get out of there. Despite the pain in my foot, I managed to leave Sarah's house. When I got home, my mom, who had been eagerly waiting for me, rushed out to greet me. Seeing her, I felt so relieved that I passed out. "Jacob, thank goodness you're awake." My mom's worried face greeted me as I opened my eyes, tears welling up in her eyes. As I came to, memories of what happened at Sarah's house flooded back. I was supposed to make her happy, but instead, I ended up causing her worry and sadness. "I'm sorry, Mom. I don't think I can introduce you to my girlfriend after all," I confessed. "Don't worry about it, Jacob. I'm just glad you're awake," my mom reassured me. I was really surprised when you collapsed in front of me. You slept for a full day due to the shock. According to the doctor, it seems like you broke a bone in your toe. You'll be discharged from a hospital soon, but it'll take about a month to heal. They also found bruises all over your body. Prompted by my mom's encouragement, I began to recount what had happened that day. As soon as I mentioned Sarah's last name, I noticed a change in my mom's expression. Johnson, you don't mean? Her face turned pale. It dawned on me that when I was in junior high, Sarah's dad had criticized my mom, saying that having a single parent's child around was a bad influence on his daughter. My dad wasn't around during my junior high years, and my mom, who was working hard every day, could only attend school events once in those 3 years. She was hurt deeply by what Sarah's dad said to her on that occasion. She never spoke about it or showed any signs of being affected by it. But now, seeing my mom's frustrated expression, saying, "I can't believe the person who said such a thing hurt my son," my anger surged. It wasn't just about him looking down on me for only finishing junior high, but he had also hurt my mom in the past. At that moment, I resolved to confront them, father and daughter. The next day, I made my way to Sarah's house again. I had let her know beforehand, but Sarah didn't seem to feel guilty about what happened. Instead, she blamed me for the lack of communication during the day I was unconscious. That's just how she was. It made me feel pathetic to think that the person I planned to marry could act like that. But at the same time, I realized it was a good thing to find out before getting married. When I arrived at Sarah's house, both her parents were waiting outside. "Daring to come back here? Don't you dare set foot in this house again." Sarah's dad was already being aggressive. He didn't even acknowledge that I was on crutches with a cast on my left foot. "I have no intention of coming back inside. I've decided to file a complaint, so I came to inform you today," I declared. My words seemed to catch them off guard, and they exchanged looks before bursting into laughter. "Wait, you're serious about filing a complaint? You weren't seriously hurt. It's ridiculous to sue your fiancé's dad," Sarah argued. I informed her that the engagement was off. I thought they might be surprised or upset when I mentioned the complaint and the breakup, but they didn't seem to care. "Don't give up just because the meeting didn't go well. If you apologize, Jacob, I'll ask my dad to give you another chance," Sarah said arrogantly. "Why should I apologize?" I felt my anger rising, and I said firmly, "I have nothing to apologize for. I'm serious about both ending the engagement and filing the complaint." Then Sarah, trying to play the tragic hero, said, "My father could easily squash something like a police report. He could even make this broken engagement disappear if it happened now." I couldn't believe her audacity. How dare she act so superior? Then even Sarah's dad joined in, saying, "Sarah, we're better off without a man like this. Go ahead, file a police report if you want. I doubt you have enough evidence for it to mean anything anyway," he sneered, laughing mockingly. Like father, like daughter. That phrase suddenly felt very fitting. "Are you sure about that?" I decided to disrupt their laughter. "You have no proof that I did anything, so the police can't do anything. You thought I'd back down if you mentioned a police report, didn't you, fool?" "You should know better than to think that would scare me," I said, hands on hips. Sarah's father laughed confidently. That's when I decided to reveal the reality of the situation. "Actually, that's the evidence." Apparently not understanding what I meant, the three of them just stared at me in disbelief. I pulled out my phone and played a recording. I had been recording everything since before I arrived. I needed evidence that my injuries were caused by them. No matter how high up they were in a big corporation, they couldn't escape an assault charge when the evidence was clear. Instead of apologizing, Sarah's father started yelling at me. "How dare you? Go ahead, file your report. There's no way I'm letting you marry Sarah." Sarah's mom, who had been quiet until now, began to panic. "We can still forgive him if we do it now, right, honey?" she pleaded. "No need. As I said earlier, the engagement is off and I will file a report. I don't want to marry someone who doesn't care when their fiancé is injured and who joins their parents in making fun of me," I declared. When I said that, Sarah, who had been looking down on me until just now, started to panic. "You're lying, Jacob. You said you wanted to marry me, you liar." Sarah's dad then erupted, "You low-educated punk. I'll never forgive you," and lunged at me. His punch caught me off guard, knocking me to the ground. Sarah's mom desperately tried to stop her husband from continuing to attack me while I was down. "Honey, This is bad. We don't know who might be watching, she pleaded, but Sarah's dad didn't stop. You're just a figurehead CEO. You used that to lure Sarah, and now you're going to sue me? I'll sue you for fraud. Then I'll have to cancel our $5 million order with your company, he threatened. I had been contemplating it for a while, and I had made up my mind. I was going to corner this man as much as possible. What are you talking about, $5 million? There's no way you can make a deal like that. Sarah's father scoffed, getting off me and calling me an idiot. It was time to show him reality. I called my mother. What are you going to achieve by calling your mother? Sarah told me mockingly, you only have one parent. How sad that you only have your mother to help you in times like this. It really does make a difference not having a father, huh? Sarah's father, unaware of what was coming, continued to look down on me. It was almost comical. About 10 minutes later, the moment I had been waiting for arrived. Sarah's father's phone started ringing. He said it was from his company and answered the call. At first he spoke confidently, but his speech gradually became sluggish, and his face turned pale. As soon as he ended the call, he glared at me. What the hell have you done? He demanded. I did exactly what I said earlier. I canceled the order. I didn't want to do business with a company that looks down on people for their education level or family background, I explained calmly. Sarah's father still seemed skeptical. There's no way someone with your low education level could do that. Do you have connections or something? He scoffed, continuing to belittle me for my limited education. I lost all interest in continuing the conversation. Believe what you want. Goodbye, I said and turned to leave. Wait a minute. Sarah's father tried to chase after me, shouting, but he was stopped by Sarah and her mother, demanding, What's this about $5 million? What was that phone call about? He was stuck. It was true that I only finished middle school, and it could be said that I just caught the startup wave. But with the money I saved with my mother, I started a successful business that traded with major companies. Now I had my mother, who was the vice president of my company, contact Sarah's father's company. I didn't want to mix personal matters with work, but I had reached my limit. When I got home and saw my mother's usual cheerful face, I felt guilty for bringing my personal matters into it. I felt like my time as a CEO was over, and I regretted making my mother take on such an unpleasant role. Sorry, Mom, for making you make that unpleasant call. I apologized. But instead of being upset, my mother was smiling. When I asked her why, she said, I came up with a good idea and decided on my own, without consulting you, the CEO. It turns out, when my mother called the president of the other company, she told them what Sarah's father had done to me. She suggested that if Sarah's father was fired, the cancellation of the order could be revoked. By the time I got home, the president of the other company had called to say that Sarah's father had indeed been fired. True to her word, my mother continued the order. I didn't mind making the call, and we didn't have to search for another supplier. We simply removed a toxic individual who only cared about status and insulted others. With that, my mother encouraged me as if there was nothing to worry about. Afterwards, I received numerous calls and emails from Sarah, pressuring me to marry her, so I blocked her number. According to a story I heard from a middle school classmate, after this incident, Sarah found out I was the CEO and approached me at the reunion. She likely wanted to be the CEO's wife and began dating me, discussing marriage. Sarah's father was arrested because I filed a complaint. Sarah's mother, who had been boasting about her husband's job at a major company, couldn't bear the neighborhood's judgment upon learning he was arrested. She seemed to have disappeared somewhere, leaving Sarah behind. It was a fitting end for a mother and daughter who were solely concerned about their image. I maintained our contract with the company where Sarah's father had worked, and we now have a good relationship. There are discussions about new projects, and it seems like my days will remain busy but fulfilling for a while. Hey sis, why didn't you come to Mom's funeral? What? I can't believe you didn't even show up to Mom's funeral. It's shocking and heartless. I never thought my own sister could do something like that. I was taken aback by my sister's sudden phone call. Our mother had passed away 3 years ago, and we held a proper funeral then. I couldn't understand what she was referring to. I'm married now with children of my own. My husband and I both work, but we make sure to give our children extra love and attention so they don't feel neglected. My husband is a great partner in housework and childcare, and I'm proud of the family we've built. I'm determined not to let my children go through what I did growing up. Our parents divorced when I was in elementary school after my mother had an affair. My father found out about it because I told him. People often assume children will side with their mother, but I didn't. My mother was far from the nurturing figure everyone imagines. I never felt loved by her. She showed favoritism towards my younger sister, while I was burdened with the household chores. It wasn't just expected, it was forced on me. My mother resented me for revealing her affair and made my life a misery because of it. I still carry the emotional and physical scars she inflicted. When the divorce was finalized, my mother took my sister and left. Thankfully, my father and grandparents ensured I maintained contact with my sister, and we continued to meet regularly. However, as I entered middle school, our visits became less frequent. At first, I thought it was just a matter of adult responsibilities, but it seemed my sister was deliberately avoiding me. After she turned down my invitation several times, I asked if I had done something to upset her. My sister explained that our mother had told her the collapse of our family was my fault. In their eyes, I was the one who betrayed the family. My sister believed that if she continued to see me, she would risk being cast aside as well. She found it too difficult to contact or meet me behind our mother's back and asked me to stop trying. I told my sister that our mother was the one who betrayed us first by cheating on our father and breaking up our family. Although my sister was aware of our mother's affair, she still blamed me for telling our father. Despite understanding the situation, she remained firm in her view that I was the traitor since she had to live with our mother. She wouldn't accept my perspective, insisting it was my fault for not turning a blind eye. While all this was happening, my father remarried, and I gained a stepmother. Initially, the adjustment was challenging, but my stepmother worked hard to become the mother figure I had been missing. Appreciating her efforts, I decided to embrace my new family and cherish my stepmother. Over time, I stopped trying to reach out to my sister, and we gradually lost touch. I had no lingering attachment to my biological mother, who had favored my sister. I was able to attend college and secure a job, preparing to give back to my father and stepmother. But then, just as I thought I could start repaying them, my father tragically passed away in an accident. Although we had grown distant, I notified my sister about our father's passing, reminding her that he was still her father. Instead of expressing sympathy, she scoffed and said, "Serves him right," followed by a mocking laugh. I thought she might attend the funeral, but neither my biological mother nor my sister made an appearance. Their absence was surprising, but they both showed up later when the time came to discuss my father's inheritance. Their sudden arrival caught everyone off guard, especially given their flashy and overly elaborate attire and makeup. They looked so different from the mother and sister I once knew that they were hardly recognizable. "At least let us know when the inheritance meeting is," they demanded. We had to check every day because we didn't know when it would happen. My mother claimed she had been waiting nearby since the funeral ended, eager to join the inheritance discussions. It seemed more appropriate for her to attend the funeral instead, especially since the meeting was scheduled for the day immediately following the funeral. "Because of what you said, my poor daughter had to endure so much. You're going to give us a fair share, right?" Although they divorced and lived separately, the children still have inheritance rights. I never intended to deny that. My father's personal estate wasn't substantial enough to be widely distributed among the family. I can support myself through my job, and my stepmother is young enough to continue working. She seems inclined to work for a while longer, so even if I handed over my father's estate to my biological mother, my stepmother wouldn't be financially strained. To avoid further disputes, I decided to forgo my claim to my father's inheritance. What a fool! He made such a big deal out of a minor affair and pushed for a divorce. I agreed because staying with such a narrow-minded man was stifling. It wasn't our dad who left Mom, it was Mom who left our miserly dad. Poor you, having to grow up with such a father. My mother mocked and belittled my late father, while my sister joined in, laughing harshly and echoing her criticism. My sister went as far as to insult me, suggesting it was pathetic that I was raised by a father who had been abandoned. Neither of them showed any empathy or understanding for the sorrow and loss my father faced after being betrayed. Say whatever you want about me, but please respect our father's memory." "What?" the traitor speaks. "You're the cause of all our troubles. And what about that drab appearance? You look older than your age, almost like Mom. With that kind of look, you probably don't have a boyfriend. If you can't attract a man, what use is it to be a woman? If you don't think that matters, you're seriously lacking as a woman." After a heated argument, my mother and sister told me to never contact them again and left abruptly. I couldn't bring myself to feel anger or disappointment toward them. Their inability to consider anyone else's perspective and their rigid self-centeredness left me feeling nothing but a deep emptiness. In that moment, I cut them out of my life completely. After they left, there was a period of quiet, but then a cough from someone brought me back to the present, and the inheritance was divided solemnly. Years later, my stepmother inherited the house my father left behind, and I continued living there. I sensed that she was thinking of me, even though I was now an adult. She tried to be a mother figure for me, and her care brought me happiness. But then she fell ill and was hospitalized. "I'm sorry I didn't ask you to live with me just so you could take care of me," she said. "I understand, but even though we live separately, I would have cared for you during your hospital stay, so there's no need to apologize." I visited the hospital to care for my stepmother whenever I could take a break from work. I didn't want any regrets like I had when my father was ill. Perhaps it was a form of self-satisfaction. Her time was limited, and I wanted to spend as much of it with her as possible. Throughout this difficult time, one man stood by me. Before my stepmother's illness was discovered, we had been planning our wedding. However, just as we were about to finalize our plans, we found out about her illness. I suggested postponing the marriage, but my partner felt it would be better to provide my stepmother with the reassurance of our commitment, and his presence proved invaluable to me. When the moment was right, I introduced him to my stepmother. He told her, "I'm excited for us to share our lives together, the three of us." His words and support meant the world to me. He added, "I have to see you in your wedding dress for your father's sake." This seemed to be her greatest joy, and she held on longer than expected. But a few days after our wedding, she passed away, joining my father in rest. My stepmother was financially secure, and I inherited a significant sum. With what she left behind, 3 years later I was able to build a happy family. However, my husband and I agreed from the start of our marriage to continue working and live within our means without depending on the inheritance. Today, like any other day, I went to work and received a call on my personal phone from an unfamiliar number. Assuming it was a sales call, I didn't pick up. But the calls kept coming, one after another. I thought maybe someone was repeatedly dialing my number by mistake. At the end of the day, I decided to answer, and to my surprise, it was my estranged sister. "Finally, where were you?" "What do you mean? How could you forget our mother's funeral?" "Of course." She sounded like she was crying heavily. "What are you talking about? Our mother's funeral happened 3 years ago." "Huh." There was a brief silence, and then she continued angrily. "Maybe your stepmother died too. I'm talking about our real mother, and calling someone unrelated to you mother is just wrong." I found her tone irritating, but I tried to set it aside, understanding that the loss of her mother was likely a significant shock for my sister. For me, my stepmother was my real mother. She married a man with a child and instantly became a parent to a middle schooler. It wasn't until I had my own family that I fully grasped the challenges she faced. I believe the experience of nurturing a life within oneself is a time for a mother to grow in self-awareness and dedication. Of course, there are many ways to create a loving family, such as through adoption, without a biological connection. However, stepping into the role of a mother to a middle schooler unexpectedly is no easy feat, no matter how you look at it. Reflecting on my stepmother's efforts and concerns, all I feel is deep gratitude. I am eternally grateful to the stepmother who raised me. She is the model of the mother I aspire to be. Biological connections mean little. My sister's so-called real mother never even acknowledged my existence. When I think of the word mother, it's my stepmother who comes to mind, not my birth mother. At first, I was confused. I had assumed she was talking about my stepmother. Once I understood what my sister meant, I responded with a lack of interest. "Oh, I see." I could hear what sounded like her hitting or stomping on something in frustration over the phone. "What?" That indifferent tone. "The funeral has already happened. How could you not attend your own relative's funeral? You're so heartless. You must not have a drop of compassion." Though she raised a valid point, my sister had also skipped our relative's funeral. Our late father loved both of us dearly, and he was far more caring than our mother. In fact, neither my birth mother nor my sister attended our father's funeral, yet they took his inheritance and spoke ill of him. If you ask me, it seems more like they're the ones who lack compassion. Indifferent? Weren't you the one who said we were strangers? Huh. You got involved in the inheritance despite skipping Dad's funeral, right? Weren't you the one who told me never to contact you again? And I only just found out about our mother's death. After a pause, my sister murmured a small, "Oh, I forgot to tell you about the funeral." Well, I'm glad you remembered. I'm going to waive any inheritance related to that woman, so you can do as you wish with it. With that, I ended the call. However, my sister, perhaps not fully grasping the situation, contacted me again a few days later. "Katie, I need your help. It seems our mother hinted at marriage to several men. Isn't that considered marriage fraud? They're threatening to sue me for compensation if I don't comply. I'm getting bombarded with demands. Just pay them. If I could, I wouldn't be calling you. Didn't you hear me say several men? It's not just one or two. Some of them seem really shady too. That's unfortunate, but let's not forget, you were the one who told me not to contact you again. Plus, it was no secret that our mother had a habit of being involved with men since she cheated on our father while he was still alive. In fact, it wasn't just one affair. If it had been a single lapse in judgment, our father might have considered forgiving her. Only he would truly know the situation. It's possible that I couldn't accept our mother, given her multiple relationships while raising us. My father tried to adopt my sister multiple times with the help of a lawyer, but I was informed that my sister didn't want to leave. I had to let go of the idea. My sister chose to stay with our irresponsible mother, even though she witnessed her behavior firsthand. Even if our mother had left a strong impression on her, my sister's decision to remain with her, despite the shared memories we have, speaks to her own responsibility as an adult. Lahats. You know you were the one calling me a traitor all this time. I don't meet a sister who labels me that way. You're the one who declared us strangers first. So don't show up now and pretend we're family. It's unwelcome. Don't ever contact me again. We're strangers, remember. I ended the call without waiting for my sister's response. I blocked her number and went back to my family. Later, I got a call from my biological mother's relatives. I thought the matter was settled, but they called to apologize for the disrespect my mother and sister had shown me. I decided to hear them out. They acknowledged how poorly my mother had treated me and expressed their shock at her audacity in trying to claim my father's inheritance after we had been separated. They offered sincere apologies for allowing her visit at a time when I was still grieving. But that's all in the past now, I said. Then they brought up my sister. Apparently, she was following in our mother's footsteps and acting irresponsibly with men. Since her return, they had repeatedly warned her that she would face consequences if she didn't change her behavior. Instead of heeding their advice, my sister had become just like our mother, and they could no longer manage her. Mother got mixed up with unsavory men, and my sister was being coerced into participating in criminal activities. Feeling trapped, my sister was also involved with multiple men simultaneously, leading to numerous heated conflicts. Reaching their limit, the relatives warned that they would sever their relationship if she didn't listen to their advice. And then our mother passed away. Given that my sister is an adult, the relatives decided to proceed with cutting ties. But right after our mother's funeral, another conflict erupted. Since then, her whereabouts have been unclear. They advised me to avoid any involvement with her going forward. I had no intention of getting involved, but I can't help feeling sorry for her, given she may have been coerced into criminal activities. Still, there should have been a chance for her to make amends. If she didn't take that opportunity, then it's on her. That's how I've chosen to see it. After ending the call, I heard my husband and children laughing joyfully in another room. I want to safeguard this family, so I've resolved to live my life using my biological mother and sister as cautionary examples.
Hello everyone, I'm Jamie, and today I'd like to share an intriguing story about my mother-in-law, Sarah. Currently, Sarah has very little influence in our lives because we've made the difficult decision to cut ties with her.
Getting to this point of no contact was far from easy. Sarah epitomizes narcissism. While I'm no psychologist, she exhibits all the classic signs of a narcissistic personality. To put it bluntly, Sarah is self-centered and thoroughly unpleasant, always prioritizing her own needs above all else. In stark contrast, my husband Paul embodies everything she is not. I believe this difference largely stems from his upbringing, as he was primarily raised by his father after his parents' divorce when he was young. Tragically, he only reconnected with Sarah after his father passed away from a terminal illness. From the stories Paul has shared, it's clear that Sarah is excessively controlling and manipulative. He once confided in me, "Jamie, my mom demands so much from me. She feels entitled to everything I have and expects me to take care of her forever." He recounted how she used to take his entire paycheck when he started working during school. For years, Paul thought this level of control was normal, but I knew it wasn't healthy. "You were essentially enslaved," I told him. "You worked while she lounged around in her apartment. You need to make some serious financial changes." "I know," he replied, his frustration evident. "I've tried talking to her, but she always guilt trips me about abandoning her or leaving her to fend for herself. I even suggested she find a job, but she refuses to listen." Paul struggled with his student loans while financially supporting Sarah, who had stopped working when he was just 17. The same year, he landed his first job. From that point on, he became the family's primary breadwinner, isolated from their extended family and completely under Sarah's strict control. He had no friends because she didn't allow it, and he could barely afford a phone. When Paul went to college, he was introduced to a whole new world, despite Sarah's attempts to keep him from attending. It was there, away from her overwhelming influence and among diverse people, that he finally recognized how abnormal his upbringing had been. 3 years into our relationship, I felt compelled to confront him about it. "Paul, your mother has been emotionally abusive towards you. She's manipulated you for years and squandered the inheritance your father left you. Why do you continue to support her?" "What can I do, Jamie?" he replied, his voice heavy with resignation. "She's still my mom. After years of hearing that she deserves my money, it's hard to break free. I can't cut her off entirely. She's the only family I have left apart from you." "I understand that," I said gently, "but you need to reconsider your situation. You're drowning in debt. How much longer can you keep this up?" Paul didn't have an answer. He realized that continuing to support Sarah meant he'd never escape his financial burdens, which made me question our future together. I was acutely aware that Sarah could become a significant obstacle, potentially trying to stake a claim on everything we owned. She already resented our relationship, saying things like, "Don't think you can take my son and his money. I'm his mother and the only one who deserves his things. You're just a gold digger trying to steal him away." "You need to stop relying on Paul," I retorted. "He's an adult, and so are you. You're perfectly capable of taking care of yourself." "Shut up, girl. Don't tell me how to live my life. I won't lose my lifestyle to someone like you. Paul will always be under my control, and I'll make sure of it," she snapped back, her words piercing but failing to intimidate me. Unlike Paul, I had a strong backbone and a knack for subtle revenge, which empowered me to handle Sarah without letting her harm us too deeply, even if I often endured her insults. As time went on, I found Sarah increasingly bearable. Both Paul and I completed college. I began working at a studio while Paul secured a fantastic position as a graphic designer. Despite his challenging upbringing, he was a dedicated student who achieved significant success. However, Sarah continued to exploit his finances without remorse. When Paul and I got engaged, Sarah was furious. She accused him of marrying a gold digger and expressed her worries about her own welfare. "How can you even think of getting married now? You still need to take care of me. This would be a terrible financial decision." "Mom, I'm already taking care of you, and getting married won't change that." Paul reassured her, but Sarah remained unconvinced. "But your wife will take all your money. You'll have nothing left for me. She doesn't earn much, and her mother is no help either. They'll just become a burden to you." "Excuse me, but my mom and I can manage perfectly well on our own." "We don't need to rely on your son," I interjected calmly, though her accusations stung. I held back the urge to tell her that she was the real financial burden. I knew that would only spark a pointless argument. I preferred to maintain the peace. Sarah saw my silence as an opportunity to further insult me and my family. My family, valuing respect and dignity, chose not to retaliate against her barbs, opting not to stoop to the level of arguing with a narcissist. Despite Sarah's attempts to sabotage our wedding plans, Paul managed the situation well. Although it frustrated him, he couldn't bring himself to completely sever ties with her. After our wedding, we settled into our new home. The specifics of how we acquired the house aren't relevant right now, but when Sarah found out, she was livid. She called me seething. "So, you've already started messing with my son's money? Buying expensive houses without even discussing it with me?" "I have no idea what you're talking about, Sarah. Besides, how Paul and I manage our finances is none of your business," I replied, standing firm. I cut the conversation short, replying firmly. Sarah's resentment was palpable. "You think you can live in a big house while I'm stuck in this small rented apartment? Mark my words, Jamie, you won't enjoy my son's house alone." At the time, I brushed off her threats. She had a knack for making dramatic statements, and I had learned to ignore her, refusing to give her the reaction she craved. That was until one day when something alarming happened. While I was at work, my mom called, sounding puzzled and concerned. "Jamie, why is your stuff at my house? Did something happen with Paul?" "What are you talking about, Mom? Nothing is wrong between us." "How do you know it's my stuff?" "The moving guys told me your name," she explained. This unexpected turn of events hinted at Sarah's deeper meddling, a dark reminder that my strategy of ignoring her might no longer suffice. "Jamie, your boxes arrived here with your name and address on them. I've opened a few, and they're filled with your clothes. What's going on? Did the movers say who sent them?" My heart sank with a dreadful suspicion. "They mentioned someone named Sarah," she replied, her voice laced with concern. "I think you should come home right away and sort this out." Taking her advice, I left work in a hurry and rushed home. As I stepped into my bedroom, a shocking sight greeted me. My drawers and closet were empty, even my bath products were gone. I was stunned. Descending to the living room, I found Sarah sitting there with a smug expression on her face. "What the hell is going on, Sarah? Why did you touch my stuff and send it to my mom's house?" I demanded, struggling to keep my composure. Her response was chilling. "I'm here to set things right. From now on, only the homeowner and his mother will live in this house. A mother always has more rights than a wife. It's unfair for you to live here." "What are you talking about? You're out of your mind." I shot back, my anger rising. "Since the house belongs to my son, only he and I will stay here. You need to leave and go to a house that's in your name." "So, you're saying only the person who owns the house should stay here?" I clarified, trying to comprehend her twisted logic. "That's exactly right," she replied, a triumphant glint in her eye. "What I mean is, since I've already sent your stuff away, you can just leave. Don't worry, my son and I will be very happy here," she declared before turning and heading upstairs. I was furious at her audacity, unable to believe she was trying to throw me out of my own house. This house was in my name, and I was the rightful occupant. I couldn't let her force me out without taking action, so I made a strategic call. I immediately phoned Paul, urging him to come home as quickly as possible. He assured me he'd be there soon. When my mom arrived to check on the situation, we were both deeply unsettled, but I knew we needed to stand our ground against Sarah's outrageous attempt to usurp our home. When Sarah saw my mother, she was visibly flustered. "What the hell, Jamie? Why is your mother here? I told you that you and your family can't be here. I've already sent your stuff to your mother's place." "Then why is she here?" I replied with a smirk. "Well, you said that from now on, only the homeowner and the mother can stay here. So I called my mother and invited her over. This house is owned by my son. You should not be here." Sarah countered sharply. "I demand that you leave immediately." I couldn't help but laugh, finding the irony delicious, and my mother joined in. Though I was angry, the laughter provided a welcome relief, reminding me of what needed to be clarified next. Once we composed ourselves, I turned to Sarah with a calm demeanor. "Just for your information, my dear mother-in-law, this house belongs to me," I began, my tone even but firm. "Yes. This house is in my name. It was part of my inheritance from my grandfather, who passed away recently. You can't be telling the truth. I don't believe you. This house cannot be yours. I know my son got this house for you." Sarah sputtered, disbelief etched across her face. "Just wait till he comes home and shows you your place. I will not tolerate you keeping me away from the house." Sarah's confusion was met with a blunt correction from my mother. "She's telling the truth, Sarah. You have some messed up logic about deserving your son's things. Even if the house is Jamie's, you shouldn't be so entitled. Jamie is Paul's wife and is equally entitled to his assets. I don't take advice from freeloaders, Sarah snapped at Rebecca. I suggest you keep your mouth shut. As for Paul, I will stay with him and ensure he divorces Jamie soon. Just a few minutes later, Paul walked through the front door, clearly bewildered by the sight of his mother standing in the middle of our living room. He looked even more puzzled to see my mother, whom I hadn't told him I invited over. Hey, guys, what's going on here? He asked as he entered. Jamie, you told me to come home soon. Has something happened? Something has happened, Paul. Your overbearing mother and her mother are trying to take over your house, Sarah declared dramatically. Paul, taken aback, responded firmly, Mom, what the hell is going on? Why would you disrespect my wife and her mother? They're right here. He then turned to me, giving me the floor to explain. Let me tell you what happened, I began, ready to unveil the absurd scenario Sarah had orchestrated. Paul stood in the middle of our living room, utterly stunned as he processed what I had just explained. Oh my God, are you serious? Mom, did you pack up Jamie's belongings and send them to her mom's house? Did you come into our home and move our things? Who gave you the right to do that? I'm just trying to help you, Sarah protested, feigning innocence. You need to reconsider your marriage. I've been telling you not to tolerate her freeloading behavior. Trust me, I can find you a better wife. Mom, I've told you so many times not to interfere in my marriage. Why are you still doing this? Paul's voice was firm, his frustration clear. I'm standing up for you. Your wife will drain your finances if you don't end this. That's why I moved into your house. I'm going to stay with you. You need to stop saying it's his house. I interjected firmly. Sarah, I've already told you this house is mine. If any mother is staying here, it will be mine. Paul looked exasperated as Sarah continued her tirade. Look at what your witch of a wife is saying. I told you she's a gold digger. She's already claiming this house is hers. Mom, stop insulting Jamie. This is ridiculous. Paul snapped, his patience worn thin. She's right, the house belongs to Jamie. It was part of her inheritance after her grandfather passed away. Sarah's face turned to ashen as the truth finally dawned on her. My mother chuckled slightly from the corner, enjoying Sarah's discomfort, while Paul looked like he was on the verge of losing his temper completely. Desperate to regain her composure, Sarah scrambled for another angle. It doesn't matter, since you two are married. This house is yours too, Paul. I have the right to stay here. Why should I live in a rented apartment when you have a house? I won't let Jamie take everything from me. You need to kick her out, Sarah insisted stubbornly. Mom, you need to leave, Paul declared, his voice rising with each word. I've had enough of you meddling in my marriage. No matter how much you dislike Jamie, I am not leaving her. I've made that abundantly clear. You've gone too far with your antics. There's no way you're staying here. Your wife is blackmailing you with the house, Paul. You can't stay with her. Trust me, it'll be so much better if you divorce her. I can find you a new wife. Sarah tried to manipulate the situation further. The tension escalated, and chaos ensued. Paul began shouting at Sarah, his anger boiling over, while I joined in, equally furious at her outrageous behavior. It was clear that this confrontation was reaching a breaking point. Finally, fed up, I took decisive action and kicked Sarah out. She looked desperately at Paul for support, but he couldn't even meet her gaze. I stormed to the guest room, grabbed her suitcases, and threw them out the door alongside her. Sarah spent a solid hour weeping on our doorstep until I warned her I would call the police if she didn't leave. Eventually, she got up and left. Inside, Paul was overwhelmed with guilt and began to apologize profusely. My mother discreetly slipped into the kitchen to give us some privacy. Jamie, I'm so sorry. I should have cut ties with my mom a long time ago. All these years, she kept attacking you, and I still allowed her into our lives. I thought she might change and accept you as my wife. But it's clear now that she never will, he lamented. Paul, I understand she's your mom, and you felt a duty to take care of her. But her behavior has been unbearable. She tried to kick me out of my own home, I replied, my voice firm yet weary. I know, Jamie, and I can't believe she went that far. But don't worry, she won't get away with this. I'm going to stop supporting her financially. She doesn't deserve my kindness after what she's done. You won't have to deal with her again, Paul promised, his tone resolute. We spent a long time discussing our boundaries and expectations moving forward, reaching a solid understanding that brought me considerable relief. To lighten the mood, my mother stayed for lunch, and we ordered some delicious meals through DoorDash. Despite the morning's upheaval, the day turned out fairly well, aside from my belongings being displaced. It was, in a way, satisfying to finally show Sarah that her behavior was unacceptable. My mother had spoken to the moving company, ensuring everything would be taken care of moving forward. When we arrived at her place and explained the situation, they agreed to return my belongings, though it would take some time. In the meantime, Sarah didn't stop her attempts to stir up trouble. She bombarded Paul with calls and sent me a barrage of texts, accusing me of controlling him and forcing him to cut her off. I shared all her messages with Paul, who was livid and found himself in several heated exchanges with his mother over the following days. It felt like we were trapped in an endless cycle of chaos. That cycle finally broke when we decided it was time to take legal action. We reported Sarah to the police, pressing charges for trespassing, theft, and harassment. The police were taken aback by the extent of her actions and took our complaints seriously. While Sarah hadn't been violent, her behavior was anything but rational. After the incident, we informed Sarah about the police report and had our lawyers begin the process of obtaining a restraining order. However, this didn't deter her. She showed up at our house, furious and unapologetic. "How dare you file a police report against me? I'm your mother, and I deserve respect. Paul, you can't do this to me," she screamed. "I'm done being quiet. What you did was a criminal offense. I don't care what the law says. I'm entitled to be in this house. You've even stopped paying me money. I have nowhere to go. You know I did my lease to live here. I demand you let me in and remove the police report." "That will never happen, Mom. Besides, you don't deserve my money after trying to destroy my marriage," Paul replied firmly. "Sarah, you need to stop shouting at our door. We decided that only the homeowner and her mother will stay here from now on. Since you are neither, you need to leave." My words pushed Sarah over the edge, causing her to have a breakdown right on our doorstep. Neighbors began peeking out of their homes, drawn by the commotion. At one point, a neighbor approached our front door to ask if he should call the police, but when Sarah lunged at him and shouted, he didn't hesitate to dial 911, letting them hear her outburst. My mother-in-law continued her tirade until the police arrived and arrested Sarah. This unfortunate spectacle provided us with the necessary evidence to secure a restraining order, especially since Sarah had also been harassing my mother. Then Paul suggested a surprising solution. "Jamie, I think we should let your mom stay with us for a while," he proposed. "Sarah knows her address and won't stop harassing her. She's becoming increasingly unhinged, and I'm worried she might escalate her behavior. It would be safest if Rebecca stayed here." "Are you sure about this, Paul? I don't want you to feel uncomfortable with her living here, and I don't think Mom would want to impose," I responded, concerned about how the dynamics might affect him. Paul assured me, "I feel bad for Rebecca, and it's the right thing to do. I don't mind at all. It's better for everyone's peace of mind if she stays with us for now." "I know Rebecca is a reasonable person, Jamie. I'd have no problem with her staying here. She's very respectful of our boundaries." That joke between us brought out a hearty laugh, lightening the mood despite the circumstances. I could see that Paul was still struggling with the fallout from his mother's actions, but he was earnestly trying to distance himself from her toxic influence. Cutting ties with a narcissistic parent is a complex and painful process, and we've been discussing therapy for Paul to help him navigate these emotional waters. He's open to the idea but needs some time to organize his thoughts. Understanding his mental state, I'm doing my best to support him. Meanwhile, cut off from directly contacting us, Sarah has been trying to appeal to my mom, Rebecca, to garner sympathy. She laments how unfairly she's been treated, claiming she has nowhere to go and is now living in her car. Over the years, Sarah has alienated so many people that no one is willing to take her in. Paul remains firm in his decision not to support her financially anymore, forcing Sarah to confront the reality of finding a job, an idea that terrifies her, especially with several police reports and an arrest on her record. We've reached a point where we are indifferent to her plight. I can candidly say that I am relieved to see Sarah facing the consequences of her actions. This tough love is long overdue, and while it's harsh, it's necessary for our peace and to finally bring some sanity back into our lives.
I'm Karen, a 25-year-old employee. And 6 months ago, my grandfather, who raised me, passed away. Today is the day when the lawyer will open my grandfather's will, prompting my visit to his house with my sister Susan. Susan, 4 years older than me, is my only family since our parents passed away in an accident 20 years ago. Raised by our grandparents, we faced the loss of our grandmother to illness a few years ago, and our grandfather's health had been declining ever since. Concerned for him, I chose to live in an apartment near his house, regularly checking on him. "You're a grown woman. It's unbecoming to keep coming back home," my grandfather would say cheerfully. But despite his words, I continued my visits. One day, arriving as usual, I discovered my grandfather in pain at the entrance. In a panic, I called an ambulance, but he passed away suddenly. "Hey, what are you daydreaming for? At least prepare some tea," my sister Susan's voice brought me back to reality. "Right, the lawyer will be here soon," I replied, heading to the kitchen. Glancing at Susan stretching out her legs on the mat and yawning, I could still smell her strong perfume from a distance. "She's the same as always," I murmured as I placed the kettle on the stove. My sister had always been self-centered, dyeing her hair in her teens and hanging out with delinquents. She demanded money without working, causing trouble that our grandparents had to apologize for, leaving me to deal with the fallout as the quiet one. Even as an adult with no stable job, she drifted around, working part-time. I knew she had been asking our grandfather for money in my absence, finding the situation troublesome. If it weren't for the inheritance, I thought, interrupted by Susan's formal greeting to the arriving lawyer. "Ah, you must be the lawyer. Thanks for coming today," she said in her high-pitched voice. Rushing to join them, I thanked the lawyer for his presence, recalling his kind eyes that mirrored my grandfather's. The lawyer's badge gleamed brightly on his chest as we began the process after offering incense in front of my grandfather's portrait. He took a sip of the tea, marking the beginning of a significant and uncertain chapter in our lives. I retrieved my grandfather's will, a document entrusted to him while he was still alive. Its contents revealed that my elder sister Susan was to inherit $20 million in cash, while I, the younger daughter, would inherit the house and the land it stood on. Upon hearing this, Susan burst into laughter, finding it amusing that she was to receive a substantial sum while I, the younger and supposedly plainer sister, would only inherit an old house. "It's just right for someone as plain as you," she remarked snidely. I retorted, pointing out that it wasn't just the house but also the land. She dismissed the value of the land in such a seemingly undesirable location, expressing a preference for cash. I couldn't deny feeling a bit shocked, acknowledging that perhaps my grandfather wanted me to protect his cherished house and land, where he spent his life with my grandmother. "Wow, a house and land. That's pretty awesome, isn't it, Brian?" my boyfriend exclaimed in surprise upon hearing my story. Shaking my head, I implied that it wasn't as great as it sounded, given that my sister inherited $20 million in cash. "More impressive, I'd say," I remarked, feeling a sense of emptiness as I verbalized it. Trying to be modest, I continued, even though I was trying to be modest. "Beautiful and having money, now she's the more, the better," Brian remarked insensitively. Earning a side glance from me, realizing his mistake, he jokingly added, "Your comfort means more to me than money." Brian had been my boyfriend since I started working, and we met at a social event. Although he hadn't proposed yet, I had been considering marriage, and today was our first date in the wild. I ended up sharing details about my inheritance with Brian, thinking he might become my husband someday. Little did I know that I would come to regret this. A few days later, as I visited the family home I had inherited, I planned to clean and sort out my grandfather's belongings. The property was large, but the house was modest. Contemplating the idea of moving in and living here leisurely with a cat, I considered the absence of rent payments, despite potential maintenance costs for deterioration. I had been working hard and saving, so it shouldn't be a problem. Someday, maybe with Brian. Feeling embarrassed at the thought, I shook my head vigorously and rolled up my sleeves to begin cleaning. Just then, I received a call, and my sister's name appeared on my smartphone screen. "Sis, what's up?" "Hey, Karen, having fun all by yourself in that old house?" My sister slurred, clearly intoxicated. She always had a unique way of extending her words, but today it was particularly bad. "Since you're drinking, aren't you?" "It's still afternoon," I pointed out with a sigh, to which she exaggeratedly sighed back. "Oh, you're such a Miss Goody Two-Shoes." "I was thinking about moving here eventually," I answered my sister's question, hoping to end the conversation quickly. "Really? I'm enjoying a suite in a luxury hotel right now." My sister raised her voice, sounding somewhat exaggerated. "Guess who I'm with right now?" "I have no idea," I replied, finding the situation rather boring. "It's that kind of attitude that'll make Brian dislike you," my sister quipped. "What?" "I'm sorry, Karen." I was flabbergasted when Brian's voice suddenly took over the line. The sudden intervention of Brian threw me off balance, and dizzying question marks popped up in my head. I resented my imagination at this point. A disgusting scenario had been completed in my head. Surprised, "Huh?" My sister's mean-spirited voice chimed in. "Ever since you introduced him to me, I thought Brian was quite a catch." She went on to boast about how she had been attracted to Brian since I introduced him, how she knew where he worked because of me, and how she had approached him as soon as he left work. He came along readily when she asked, telling her that she was hundreds of times more attractive than me. I listened in stunned silence, unable to utter a word. "Karen, I'm really sorry," Brian's voice came again. "Tell me it's a mistake." I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. As a man, I had to take this opportunity. I do feel bad about it, but come on, it's impossible to resist a beautiful woman who has $20 million, right? The way he spoke, as if asking me to understand, drained my emotions away, and I felt a cold sensation, like my blood was being drained from me. "You know what? I don't need a man like you," I finally said, and I could hear my sister laughing uproariously in the background. The voice on the phone changed back to my sister. "Well, that's how it is. And from now on, let's not consider ourselves sisters, okay? I wouldn't want you turning to me just because you're broke," she added before abruptly ending the call. Overwhelmed by emotions that had lied behind, all I could do was cry. It had been 5 years since that fateful call as I sat with a cat in my lap, dozing off in front of my laptop. The cat also peacefully slept. It was my day off, but there was still some work left from where I brought home. "Oh no, this won't get the work done," I thought to myself, feeling guilty. But I had to gently move the cat off my lap. Just as I reached out to my laptop, my phone started to ring. An unfamiliar number was displayed on my smartphone. Thinking it could be work-related, I answered the call without any suspicion. "Hello, Karen, long time no see." I instantly knew who it was and froze. The distinctive way of speaking was unmistakably my sister's. "It's you, Karen, isn't it? I can tell just from your initial hello. After all, I'm your big sister." 5 years had passed, which should make Susan 34 years old. A smirk formed at the corner of my mouth at her unchanging way of talking. "You're just the same. By the way, I came home, and there's a hotel standing. Did you sell a house? That's none of your business." "Oh, come on. It's quite a grand hotel, huh? You must have made a good chunk of change, huh?" Getting fed up, I was about to end the call when she started to chatter about her current situation. According to Susan, she had blown through the inheritance in about 2 years, and now she even had a considerable amount of debt. Even Brian, who she's still hanging around, seemed to be drowning in debt. I was speechless. Honestly, I couldn't care less. "So, lend me some money," Susan requested, yelling. But I answered calmly, "I've always wondered why Grandpa distributed his estate that way. But on the day you took Brian from me and cut ties, I understood." I started talking slowly, reminiscing about 5 years ago when Brian broke up with me, leaving me crushed. After crying my heart out, I sat dazed in my room, staring into space. I'm such a fool, I murmured, and large tears began to spill again. My gaze fell on a painting I had made as a child and had gifted to my grandfather. He had framed it and kept it hanging lovingly. Rising unsteadily, I picked up the painting. Grandpa. As I continued, my emotions swelled, and I started to cry. I recalled the notes my grandfather and I used to exchange on the back of that painting, like a family journal. Knowing that I was to inherit the house, he probably figured. I found this note. I'm glad I noticed, I said, shuddering at the thought that I might have left it unnoticed. I reached for a sheet of notepaper that had fallen from the back of the frame, with the note addressed to me. The date on the letter was just before my grandfather passed. I knew you'd definitely noticed this letter. Right now, you're probably wondering why I distributed my estate in such a manner. I read aloud. Cash to you, a sister, and an old house and land for you. It may seem like I favored Susan, but that's not the case, the letter revealed, finally answering the question that had been bothering me. Despite any claims of favoritism, I wanted to leave most of my estate to you, bouqueted for me till the end. I finally understood what had been bothering me, and I continued to read the letter. But Susan would not be satisfied with a regular division. This child, even as her grandfather, I must admit, she's terribly greedy. Exactly, Grandpa? I whispered in agreement, though he couldn't hear me. She even took my boyfriend from me. That's what I want to tell him in my heart. That's why I arranged it this way, I read. While Susan may appear to have received the better deal at first glance, she won't pay attention to your share. According to Grandfather's letter, the value of this land in our area is continuously increasing due to ongoing urban development. As of the time I'm writing this, it's not worth Susan's $20 million yet, but the value of this land will surely increase in the future. As I read this far, my eyes widened in surprise. You can live here if you're attached to it, or you can sell it when its value rises enough to make a good profit. All I want is for you to be happy, Grandfather's letter had said. When I finished conveying the content of the letter, Susan clicked her tongue and said, Hag. I lived in that house for a while, but when my marriage was settled, I decided to sell the house. Just like Grandfather's letter said, the land value had risen enough. Anyway, I'm never lending you money, Susan declared. But as if she had a good idea, she added, right. If you want, I can give Brian back to you. So help your sister. It's a good deal, right? At this moment, something inside me snapped. Enough was enough. You've been taken care of by my grandpa, and yet you haven't shown a hint of gratitude. I despise you for that, and you're not my sister anymore. Besides, I'm already married. I don't need Brian, and I don't even want to see his face. Stay out of my life for good. I said what I needed to say and hung up. I quickly set up call blocking, and my cat on my lap was cowering on the bed. I quickly picked up my cat and said, I'm sorry. After that, it seems Susan contacted Brian, and they both stormed into our old house. Did they try to return Brian to me? There's a respectable end there now, but they must have misunderstood something and were shouting that they were my relatives. Even though I just sold the land and had nothing to do with it, it's simple for those two. I sold the land, and an inn was built equals I must be the owner of the inn. Of course, the staff reported to the police. The two of them were arrested because they had destroyed several items in the inn. Furthermore, it was discovered that they had been committing marriage fraud for money in the past. It seems they'll be sent to prison together. I was also questioned by the police, but I was able to prove that I had no involvement. Quickly, as we were estranged, I was released. As my husband, who came to pick me up, and I were walking through the station, we heard screaming and turned our gaze. There were Susan and Brian, who looked completely different. Fortunately, they didn't notice us. Both of them had messy hair, worn-out clothes, and looked nothing like the two people I remember. Especially Susan, who never skipped her makeup and fashion, looked even more different. They were probably being moved to a different location. As I watched the two of them, filled with a sense of melancholy, my husband and I locked eyes. I grabbed the hand he extended, and we left the police station. Are you okay? My husband, always concerned, looked at me with gentle eyes. I'm okay. I have you and this little one." I touched my fairly noticeable belly and smiled back. "In my belly, a new member of our family is growing. Money is important, but there's something even more valuable. That's what I want to teach our child, with my husband by my side." Thrown at me instead of a warm greeting during a family gathering just before my son's wedding was a remark that hit hard. In front of me, a baguette from an upscale French restaurant rested on a glass plate, a symbol of unexpected humiliation served by my son's fiancé. I had raised my son, Christopher, on my own, and never did I imagine such a moment of degradation. As a 55-year-old housewife named So, widowed early in life, I had dedicated myself to nurturing Christopher. This year, he turned 25, graduated from college, and secured a job, becoming the pride of my life. Despite his success, he chose to continue living with me in the house left by his late father. I cherished the idea of spending more time with him. However, my world took an unexpected turn when Christopher revealed he had a girlfriend and intended to marry her. Initially shocked, I soon embraced the news with genuine joy, expressing my happiness at his growth. Christopher, still living with me, promised to bring her home soon, but the opportunity didn't materialize. Curiosity and anticipation built up in me, and when I finally asked about her, Christopher shared some details. Her name was Roy, 4 years older than him, and she worked as a tutor from a family of teachers. The revelation surprised me, and I wondered about their relationship, but I patiently waited to meet her. Time passed, and 2 months went by without a meeting. The absence of Roy started feeling intentional. Fate intervened when, by chance, I overheard a conversation during lunch. Seated back to back with a woman, she complained loudly about her upcoming family meeting before the wedding. Intrigued, I listened as she expressed a deliberate intention to delay meeting the family, wanting to test Christopher's commitment to their relationship and prove he was not a mama's boy. The unexpected encounter left me contemplating the dynamics at play, realizing that fate could be both intriguing and frightening. She said it, and I nearly turned around. Christopher's name echoed in the air, causing a slight dizziness. Her friend's advice to Roy, "You need to be more humble," confirmed the woman loudly discussing her future mother-in-law was none other than Christopher's fiancé. Holding my coffee cup, my hand trembled, and my friend, sensing my distress, asked if I was okay. I mechanically ate the recommended dessert, my mind fixated on escaping that place as quickly as possible. Unaware of my presence, Roy continued her complaints about her fiancé's family. She belittled the concept of a single mother family, comparing it to her supposedly superior educational background. Roy labeled me a clinging mother and spoke about making Christopher abandon me after the wedding. Fear overwhelmed any anger I felt. The conflict between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law had begun prematurely. Even before the family meeting before the wedding, Roy showcased her disdain. Yet, she was the woman Christopher chose. I tried to reassure myself that there must be something wonderful about her. Back home, I attempted to calm my nerves, resolving not to tell Christopher about this incident. Alone, I stopped pushing him about the family meeting. I knew she had no intention of attending, and I refused to continuously be looked down upon by being too accommodating. Christopher sensed my change of heart, but didn't press further. "It's okay if you're busy, whenever it's convenient for you," I told him, trying to ease his burden. The wedding plans between Christopher and Roy seemed to progress faster than the family meeting. Spotting a wedding venue brochure on the living room table, I realized the countdown had begun. I contemplated speaking up about the wrong order of things, but refrained for my son's sake. Making a fuss would lead to accusations of being unable to let go or being a mama's boy. Faceless accusations that would upset me. Christopher was crucial to me, but he was an independent adult. I had refrained from interfering more than necessary, demonstrating my tolerance. One morning, Christopher abruptly announced a family meeting with the parents-in-law. They had reserved a fancy French restaurant, and he wanted me to come. The meeting was scheduled in 2 days, a sudden announcement that left me a bit irritated. Shouldn't such things be planned after matching everyone's schedules? I held back my frustration, saying, "All right, I haven't formally met Roy yet, so it's good to meet her sooner." Christopher apologized for the sudden plan, but in my mind, it was Roy and her family who should be apologizing, not him. I reassured him that it's fine. On the day of the family meeting, Christopher and I arrived at the designated upscale French restaurant. I felt a bit nervous, it being my first time at such a fancy place. Christopher chuckled, acknowledging the nerve-wracking atmosphere. As we gave our name to the staff, we were guided to a private room where Roy's family had already gathered. Roy and her mother, Mara, were present. Excusing ourselves, I opened the door to the private room. Seated there were Mara, exuding a definite teacher vibe, and Roy, sporting slightly flashy makeup. Her dress seemed mismatched, likely chosen by Mara for the occasion. Roy and Mara remained silent until I finished my greetings, their scrutiny palpable as if evaluating me as a lesser presence. Christopher, familiar with Mara, greeted her with "long time no see." Mara chuckled, mentioning she had been looking forward to meeting the famous mother, a slight sting in her mention of single mother. Suppressing any reaction, I played it down, emphasizing Christopher's inexperience and suggesting they take care of him. Mara, contentedly nodding, maintained an air of superiority. Her demeanor hinted at how she might treat her students and their parents, an attitude I wouldn't desire for my child. She invited me to sit, yet Roy hadn't greeted me. With reluctance, I initiated conversation, prompting Roy to respond with a mocking snort, deeming repetition inefficient. Her arrogant remarks stirred anger within me, but I restrained my temper. She was the woman Christopher had chosen. I feigned calmness, acknowledging her comment with forced civility, though I felt close to my limit. Mara informed us that Roy's father would be late due to work, suggesting we proceed without him. Roy then made a seemingly innocent comment to Christopher, insinuating his lack of exposure to such lavish food due to his past poverty. Christopher, unfazed, went along with her comment. I always knew Christopher to be kind and patient, but this situation seemed beyond that. Concerns about how he navigated society started to creep in. Was he possibly being taken advantage of? A parental worry nagged at me. Ignoring the odd expressions from Roy and Mara, I suggested we enjoy the feast. However, their unpleasant smiles intensified, and the reason behind their mockery soon became apparent. As the first dish arrived on a beautifully decorated plate, I couldn't help but exclaim at the sight of a simple baguette on a glass plate. Roy and Mara seemed to find this hilariously amusing, laughing heartily at my shocked expression. It turned out that the owner of the upscale French restaurant was Mara's brother, and they had collaborated to ridicule me. "The poor that suits you best," Roy said, openly mocking me. Christopher, seemingly pale, and I were left in disbelief, trying to contain my anger. I muttered about how this supposedly suited a poor person like me. Roy misinterpreted my reaction, thinking I was crying. Dismissing it, she laughed even harder. Surprisingly, Mara, who might be expected to scold Roy, only said, "Oh dear, Roy," without any intention of reprimanding her. I couldn't bear the idea of such individuals becoming part of my family. Just as I raised my bowed head, Roy's father entered, apologizing for being late. Witnessing the baguette situation, he seemed taken aback. Roy proudly explained that she had the baguette prepared, thinking I, raised in poverty, hadn't experienced such cuisine. Her father scolded her for taking the joke too far, but couldn't hide his amusement. The thought of them becoming my family was unbearable. As the father turned pale, I looked up and recognized him. Cedric, the principal of a private high school where I had been facing difficulties. I expressed my surprise, and he exclaimed in shock, revealing that he had become the principal 3 years ago. Instead of dwelling on educational policies, I couldn't resist suggesting he pay more attention to education at home, especially considering the insult from his daughter, something I vowed never to forget. I said, staring down at him. He had always berated me, claiming that a single mother couldn't be a principal. He had spread rumors that I couldn't properly educate my own child. Roy, realizing the impact of her actions, seemed taken aback. Marcia trembled, lost for words. I looked at each member of Roy's family and slowly bit into the baguette. The sound of me crunching echoed in the room. Delicious, as expected of a high-end French restaurant's baguette. "How about it, Cedric?" I'd offered, smiling as I held out the glass plate with the baguette. His hand trembled amusingly as he took it. "Don't get the wrong idea. I'd always separate work and personal life. Your dismissal has always been a topic at the board meetings. I was the one opposing it. Without rivalry, there's no momentum for reform. But your role ends here," I declared, giving him a final warning. In fact, I had evidence of him accepting bribes during admissions, manipulating interviews, and enjoying a luxurious life with that money. I was still deciding whether to pursue criminal charges, but if he left the school quietly, I was willing to let it go. "Christopher, let's go home. She may be this kind of lady, but can you still see her as a marriage partner? I won't stop you if you choose her," I said to Christopher, whose gaze was fixed on the baguette Cedric held out to him. Roy, with a strange smile, whispered, "You'll marry me, right?" Thinking that marrying him was her only way to save Cedric's position, her pleading eyes turned to him. He looked down, gripping his hands on his knees. "The engagement is off. This marriage is as if it never happened," he declared. "It's just a joke. I didn't mean to mock you. It's a joke, Christopher." "You're so stiff." Roy desperately tried to cover up. If that wasn't mockery, then what was it? I was amazed that she couldn't come up with a better excuse. He looked at Roy with an unexpectedly cold gaze. "Roy, you've been given a lot by your parents, education and love. But I believe I received even more from my mom. Seeing her work was cool. She's still cool," he declared. He could never forgive her for mocking me and expressed pity for the students she was teaching. "I wouldn't want to be taught by someone like her. I heard bad rumors about you but chose to believe otherwise. You betrayed that trust," he said, causing tears to stream down Roy's face. She seemed to finally understand the irreversible damage done. Wait. You're joking about the breakup, right? I bragged about getting married to my friends. I can't break it off. It's embarrassing," she pleaded tearfully. "What's most necessary for you now is to reflect on how things came to this. We probably won't see each other again, but I hope you grow," I said. As Christopher and I were about to leave the private room, Cedric grabbed his shoulder to stop him. Christopher shook off his hand as if it were something filthy. "I've been patient, but let me say this clearly. What's wrong with being raised by a single mother? Did you see Roy's vulgar behavior? Raised by respectable parents. You should be more ashamed," he said firmly. Cedric had no response and looked down in shame. Roy's cries echoed in the private room as we left the restaurant. The moment we stepped outside, we heard Cedric's angry voice, probably yelling at Roy. "Christopher, you need to be more discerning in choosing women." When I said that, he scratched his head and mumbled, "It's embarrassing." Apparently, Roy had aggressively pursued him, and Christopher, who tends to be easily swayed, fell into that situation. It was clear that Roy saw an opportunity in him. Regardless, I expressed relief that everything came to light before the marriage as we headed home. The engagement ended amicably. Roy initially demanded compensation, but Christopher dismissed it logically, explaining to his lawyer that Roy was entirely to blame for the broken engagement. The compensation demand was dropped, and when threatened with a lawsuit, Roy quickly backed down. Perhaps her parents advised her not to escalate the situation further. Though I usually keep work and personal life separate, Cedric had to leave the school due to the bribery issue during admissions becoming public. Faced with the choice of leaving quietly or going to court, he opted for the former. Unemployed and desperately seeking a new job, he faced the challenge of overcoming the bad rumors that spread fast in the industry. Roy, having resigned from her tutoring job, was reportedly confined to a room in her parents' house, too embarrassed to even seek new employment. Marcia, burdened with 2 unemployed adults, was allegedly preparing for divorce, yet she couldn't maintain her previous luxurious lifestyle. She wanted to use her earnings solely for herself, citing that as her reason for divorce. A logical decision, perhaps, but one that led to the family's downfall. While I feel a bit sorry for her, I believe it's her responsibility. Sometimes after the incident, I felt genuinely happy for the first time in a while. Christopher introduced me to a wonderful woman, a single mother working at the same place as him. She has a daughter about to turn 3, and it seems she was the one who lifted Christopher's spirits after the broken engagement with Roy. She is bright and sunny, and her daughter is fond of Christopher. Despite the roundabout journey, I am slightly relieved that Christopher seems to be on his way to building a happy family. Maybe, despite the challenges, I'll even become a grandmother.
In a heartbeat, my world was shattered when my husband's voice, cold and harsh, blared through the phone. "Why do you always fall apart when I need you?" he scolded, seemingly blind to the urgency that had sent me rushing to the hospital with our unborn child's safety hanging in the balance. "We're starving here, waiting for your awful cooking, while you're off lounging in the hospital," he went on, his tone completely devoid of empathy. He announced he'd had enough and was going out to eat with his parents, leaving me to find my own way home. His frustration pierced through the phone, blaming me for a crisis I had no control over, and only deepening my fear and worry for our unborn child, whom I was desperately trying to protect. I was once a dedicated cosmetics salesperson, known for my passion and commitment, with a collection of awards and a stellar reputation to prove it. My job fueled my confidence and was a source of immense pride. Meeting my husband felt like a fairy tale come true, leading to a whirlwind romance and marriage. However, the joy of discovering I was pregnant brought a difficult decision, leaving my job to reduce the risk of miscarriage, a choice I made for the sake of our family's future. As I faced the challenges of pregnancy, my husband's support began to dwindle. What had started as shared excitement soon turned into frustration. Simple tasks that once seemed easy now felt monumental, and my efforts to meet his expectations often fell short. "Where's my lunch?" he would ask, only to dismiss the simple sandwiches I managed to make, criticizing my sensitivity to smells. His words were cutting. Pregnancy is not an illness, belittling my struggles and leaving me to fend for myself. This change in his behavior was a stark contrast to the man I had fallen in love with. His presence at doctor's appointments dwindled, and his empathy for the household chores, which now felt overwhelming to me, seemed to vanish. Our home, once a sanctuary of mutual respect and love, was increasingly feeling like a battleground. I was left trying to protect not only my own well-being but also the health of our unborn child, desperately hoping that we might find our way back to understanding and support. Maybe he's just worn out, I told myself. He had recently taken on a mentorship role for a new colleague, which had been quite demanding. This could be why he seemed more impatient and irritable with me lately. I reassured myself that once our baby arrived, his busy schedule would settle, and we'd find our groove as a family. "It's going to be all right," I murmured, gently stroking my growing belly, clinging to hope despite the challenges of my changing body and the strain in our relationship. Unfortunately, things between my husband and me haven't improved. To make matters worse, my in-laws have begun dropping by unannounced, heightening my stress levels. They've scrutinized the cleanliness of our home and voiced concerns about how we'd cope once the baby arrived. Despite their criticisms, they expected immediate hospitality and demanded I whip up something for them on the spot. Caught off guard and unprepared, I felt overwhelmed and judged for not being a better host. Each visit ended with their disappointment, and my husband consistently sided with them, never defending me. Despite my best efforts, I felt perpetually inadequate in their eyes. During one of these visits, I was sent out to buy groceries despite being heavily pregnant. The strain proved too much, and I collapsed. When I woke up in the hospital, I learned that I had fainted from overexertion, but thankfully, our baby was still safe. The doctors advised a few days of rest in the hospital. I saw missed calls from my husband on my phone and realized he must have been worried when I didn't return from the store. However, when I finally called him back, hoping to hear concern or relief in his voice, I was met with anger. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his tone harsh and unforgiving, as if my health and our baby's safety were insignificant. His words left me shivering, feeling both hurt and abandoned. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to explain. "I collapsed at the grocery store and was taken to the hospital. They have me on IV fluids and want me to stay here for a few days for observation." But his response was cold and dismissive, as if my well-being was secondary to his own inconvenience. "You collapse, and I'm supposed to care. Why don't you answer my calls? You're so slow." His harsh words stung, and I dreaded the thought of our unborn child being exposed to such negativity. "Please stop yelling. It's not good for the baby," I pleaded, but my request for compassion fell on deaf ears. He remained unrelenting, indifferent to my plea for kindness. "We're starving here, waiting for your terrible cooking, and you're just lounging in the hospital," he said, his voice dripping with anger and lacking any trace of concern. His clear intention to go out with his parents and leave me to manage on my own, despite my condition, was crushing. His harsh words made me flinch, and not wanting to expose my baby to any more negativity, I ended the call, feeling profoundly alone and disheartened. As I returned to my hospital room, tears began to flow uncontrollably. In that vulnerable moment, a comforting voice reached out to me. "Are you okay?" I looked up to see Helen, a customer I had grown close to during my time as a cosmetics salesperson, offering me a towel. Recognizing her immediately, a wave of relief and warmth washed over me. "Helen, is it really you? I'm so glad you remember me," she said with a warm smile. Our unexpected reunion felt like a twist of fate, a much-needed reminder of kindness and human connection during my darkest hour. Helen had been more than just a customer. After a painful divorce, she had lost her self-confidence and stopped wearing makeup altogether. I vividly recalled the day I approached her at the cosmetics counter, offering to help her try some new products. The transformation in her appearance was more than just physical. It marked a moment of emotional healing and a step towards regaining her self-esteem. Over time, Helen became more than a client. She became a friend. But 5 years before I left my job, she had suddenly stopped coming, and I had always wondered what had happened to her. Now, here she was, a beacon of support at a time when I needed it most. "I had come back hoping to reconnect with you, Helen," she said, her voice tinged with surprise and disappointment. "When I visited your old workplace, I was taken aback to learn that you had left." "I'm sorry for dropping in so unexpectedly," Helen explained with a chuckle. "I've been working abroad, running a business, and it's been incredibly busy. It's been ages since I've had the chance to enjoy America and its cuisine, so I decided to come back once things calmed down a bit. And of course, right after I tried to find you, I ended up here with appendicitis." Her laughter brought a sense of lightness to the situation despite the circumstances. "It's only in the early stages, so medication should sort it out. And honestly, if this had happened while I was still abroad, the treatment costs would have been sky high. In a way, I'm relieved it happened here," Helen continued, her optimism and familiar smile proving as infectious as ever. This unexpected reunion lifted my spirits, and we began to joyfully reminisce about the past. As our conversation grew more heartfelt, Helen, with her ever-kind smile, gently inquired, "You don't have to share if you're not comfortable, but I noticed you seemed upset earlier. Is everything all right?" Feeling a deep trust in Helen, not just as a former customer but as a true friend, I felt compelled to open up. I opened up to Helen about the difficulties I was facing with my husband and in-laws. "I'm really concerned about bringing my child into this environment," I admitted. "I'm afraid they'll face the same treatment I do. And now, without my job, the thought of living independently, especially with a child, feels overwhelming." To my surprise, Helen made an incredibly generous offer. "I actually have an apartment that you could use. I manage a few properties as part of a project I developed on some inherited land. It's a cozy 2-bedroom with a separate bathroom, soundproof walls, and it's in a safe neighborhood close to supermarkets and a police station. There's no need for a deposit at the moment, and you can start paying rent whenever you're ready. It's a really good deal. What do you think?" Helen's enthusiasm was unmistakable, and her offer was so genuine it made me laugh in disbelief. "Are you sure you can offer it at such favorable terms?" I asked, deeply moved by her kindness. "Absolutely," Helen replied with a warm smile. "I trust you to take great care of the place, and I think it's crucial to support each other during tough times. You're more than welcome to stay there," she assured me, her generosity evident. Helen's unexpected kindness was a beacon of hope, providing not just a place to stay but a chance for a fresh start. Eager to support someone she valued, Helen offered her apartment, an act of generosity I couldn't turn down. With heartfelt gratitude, I accepted her offer. Days later, after receiving the doctor's approval, I left the hospital and moved straight into the apartment Helen had prepared for me. Her remarkable generosity was evident in how effortlessly she had arranged everything over the phone. I didn't go back to the home I had shared with my husband. Instead, I embraced this fresh start in Helen's warm and cozy apartment. Despite feeling guilty for not paying rent immediately, Helen reassured me with a laugh, insisting there was no rush. While my husband was at work, I quietly returned to our old home to gather my belongings, only to realize how little there truly felt like mine. The house seemed as empty as the ache in my heart within its walls. Helen's support extended beyond the apartment. She introduced me to a lawyer who had previously assisted her, reinforcing my decision to pursue a divorce. The lawyer's encouragement became a beacon of hope, and as each hospital visit confirmed the health of my growing baby, my resolve only grew stronger. During one such visit, as I stepped outside, my heart sank when I saw my husband waiting for me. Panic surged through me, and despite my best efforts to flee, my pregnancy slowed me down. He confronted me about the lawyer and our new living situation, gripping my arm tightly. I stood my ground, insisting that any discussions about the divorce, compensation, or child support be handled through the lawyer. His demands for me to return and his refusal to provide support were met with my firm refusal. As my husband tried to drag me back, a young woman intervened. Her name was Rebecca, and she was clearly familiar with my husband. Stepping in front of me with a protective stance, Rebecca's presence shifted the dynamic of the confrontation. The tension between her and my husband was palpable, but Rebecca stood firm, refusing to let him take me against my will. Her resolve, coupled with the implied threat of calling the police, gave me a glimmer of hope and the courage to assert myself in the face of this unexpected conflict. When my husband heard the mention of the police, he looked alarmed and quickly left. I felt an overwhelming sense of relief that made my legs go weak. Rebecca quickly moved to my side, offering support. "Are you okay?" she asked gently as I apologized, expressing how grateful I was for her help. Without hesitation, Rebecca called a taxi for me, insisting on ensuring I got home safely. Despite feeling guilty for causing her trouble, she reassured me it was no bother. When I shared my address, Rebecca was surprised to discover that I lived just below her. It was a happy coincidence that we were neighbors. Rebecca, with her cheerful and caring demeanor, turned out to be a new employee at my husband George's workplace. She had reported George's inappropriate behavior, which led to his removal as her mentor. George was notorious for his lack of empathy towards female employees, often making insensitive remarks about personal matters like menstruation and marriage. Rebecca's experiences echoed my own, highlighting the troubling behavior I had endured from him during my pregnancy. 3 weeks after our meeting, Rebecca and I had become good friends, enjoying dinners together and sharing our lives. She informed me that George had been transferred to a subsidiary company following numerous complaints and issues at work. It turned out that Rebecca was the daughter of Helen, the successful businesswoman who managed several properties, including the apartment I was staying in. George had previously boasted about handling Helen's account, but his behavior ultimately led to a reassessment of his professional standing. Helen had advocated for George's transfer after uncovering his misconduct both at work and towards me. Rebecca, resourceful and determined, had tackled workplace issues independently without leaning on her mother's influence. However, upon discovering my connection to Helen, she felt a stronger sense of duty to act. Helen encouraged Rebecca to compile all evidence against George, which contributed to his transfer. With George now facing reduced income and an increased workload, his situation had markedly changed. Helen's advice to me, drawing on her extensive experience, was to remain resolute and not be swayed by any attempts George might make to elicit sympathy. Her guidance was a source of great reassurance, coming from someone with such expertise and understanding. After deciding to divorce George, he attempted to reach out through our lawyer, expressing how challenging work had been and how much he missed me. He even apologized and pleaded for a chance to reconcile, but I remained resolute in my decision to proceed with the divorce. Supported by Helen, George ultimately had no choice but to accept the divorce terms and agree to pay child support and damages over time. My next significant hurdle was dealing with my in-laws, particularly my father-in-law, who was overly eager about the baby being a boy. I could sense trouble brewing, and my concerns were soon validated. One day, as I was about to leave, my father-in-law grabbed my arm. Having followed Rebecca in an attempt to confront her, he instead found me. He demanded that I surrender the baby once born, insisting that the child was the family's heir. Despite my efforts to escape, his grip was firm and unyielding. Just then, a commanding voice cut through the tension, demanding my father-in-law release me. Before I could react, Rebecca executed a precise judo move, sending him sprawling to the ground. It turned out that Rebecca, a top-ranked judoka with national titles, had mastered judo to protect herself and her mother during challenging times. She confronted my father-in-law, condemning him for ignoring George's behavior and trying to interfere in my life. Rebecca firmly defended my right to move forward, making it clear that any interference was unacceptable. As the sound of approaching sirens grew louder, I realized Rebecca had called for help before stepping in to rescue me. My mother-in-law, who had been waiting nearby in the car, observed silently as the police arrived and took both her and my father-in-law into custody. In the aftermath, my father-in-law was arrested, and after some reflection, my mother-in-law chose to divorce him. She decided to start anew, moving back to the countryside to live a life free from external pressures. Despite George's pleas to accompany her, expressing his frustration with his job and the legal battles, she firmly refused, prioritizing her own fresh start over his desires. Through the lawyer, my mother-in-law reached out to offer her apologies and left a sum of money as a gesture of goodwill. Helen explained that it's not uncommon for people to feel loss after a divorce, and the money was likely her mother-in-law's way of apologizing and supporting my son's future. Although her past behavior had been troubling, I was touched by her effort to make amends and appreciated the support. Following the finalization of the divorce, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. My mother-in-law chose to settle in the countryside, preferring a life of solitude over remaining with George. When my father-in-law was eventually released, he found that the house had been demolished by my mother-in-law before her departure. Left with few options, he moved in with George, which only added to their difficulties and contributed to George's resignation from his job due to his tarnished reputation. Despite the challenges, the child support payments continued to arrive reliably, likely managed by Helen and the lawyer. Rebecca, recognized for her hard work, advanced to a project leader role, earning admiration from her colleagues. Helen's ventures, including women-only properties and housing for foreigners, were thriving. As for me, once my son grew a bit older, I planned to return to work. Helen had offered me a position at a new high-end cosmetics store she was opening. Helen remained a steadfast supporter, showering my son with affection as if he were her own grandchild. Rebecca also made time to visit us, her presence a comforting reminder of the strength and kindness that had carried me through the toughest times. Inspired by these remarkable women, I was determined to be equally strong and protective of my son, embracing the support and resilience they have shown me.
I prided myself on being a devoted father for securing a house for my daughter. However, my husband, without consulting me, decided to use my money to purchase a luxury apartment. Frustrated by his audacious plan, I swiftly responded by presenting him with divorce papers. In the face of my unexpected move, my husband was taken aback, clearly unprepared for such a turn of events. With a smirk, I, Jocelyn Anderson, a 50-year-old office worker with a passion for French since my student days, initiated what I considered the real retaliation. Let me take you back a bit. I had been married at 23, but my first husband passed away just 6 months into our marriage due to a tragic traffic accident caused by a drunk driver. Although I received $500,000 as insurance money, no amount of wealth could bring my late husband back. During that period of mourning, Ernest Anderson, a compassionate colleague from the same company, provided solace by lending a patient ear to my stories. Gradually, our connection deepened, leading to our remarriage when I was 25. Fast forward to the present, and my daughter, Christina, now an independent illustrator, had stirred tension in our family. Disagreements over her education arose during her senior year of high school. Ernest had always imposed his ideal path for Christina, envisioning her attending a prestigious university and pursuing a conventional career in a big corporation. His expectations clashed with Christina's passion for illustration, a talent she had cultivated since childhood. Despite my initial support for Ernest's educational decisions, I found myself at odds with him when Christina expressed her desire to attend an art university to become an illustrator. While I was open to embracing her chosen path, Ernest vehemently opposed it, insisting on a conventional trajectory that clashed with our daughter's dreams. The struggle over Christina's future had become the battleground, and the real retaliation was about to unfold. I opted not to embark on a freelance career initially, choosing instead to work for a company. Christina shared her aspirations to become an illustrator, but my husband dismissed her dreams, considering it merely a pastime with drawings. His harsh words compelled me to defend Christina's autonomy, asserting that it was her life, and she should have the opportunity to pursue her passion. This stance only fueled his anger, as he asserted that it was his daughter and that a child's role was to fulfill their parents' dreams. He adamantly believed that if Christina followed his prescribed path, she would unquestionably find happiness. I was taken aback by his biased views, hoping he would eventually understand and support our daughter's choices. Unfortunately, my optimism was misplaced, leading to a deep rift between us. Despite my financial support for Christina's education and living expenses, Ernest remained dissatisfied, continually expressing his discontent. Even after Christina successfully gained admission to her preferred art university and secured a job as an illustrator, Ernest refused to acknowledge her achievements. His complaints persisted, questioning the worth of the money spent on tutoring and labeling her a failure. Christina, resilient in her pursuit, worked energetically, occasionally sacrificing weekends and sleep for her craft. However, Ernest's attitude towards her job remained unchanged. Moreover, he became harsher towards me for supporting Christina, criticizing everyday aspects of our household. Realizing this was his true nature, I found staying at home increasingly painful. Fortunately, our work roles in different departments at the same company spared me from daily confrontations. Yet, amidst this strained dynamic, Ernest surprisingly declared his intention to buy Christina a luxury apartment, citing her importance as his daughter. Despite his apparent disdain for her career choice, this sudden change in attitude raised suspicions, prompting me to question his motives. Doubts crept into my mind about whether Ernest even had the financial means to purchase a luxury apartment. Observing my reaction, he coldly smirked and disclosed his plan, stating that I would be the one footing the bill. Shocked, I protested, urging him not to make such decisions without consulting me. Angrily, Ernest snorted, revealing his knowledge of the $500,000 insurance money from my late husband, suggesting I use it to fund the apartment. He callously declared his intent to live there with Christina, emphasizing that both she and I were ultimately his possessions. Fueled by a fierce anger, I could not fathom his vindictive scheme and the audacity to exploit crucial insurance money for such a purpose. In response, I retaliated without mercy, presenting him with divorce papers. Astonished, Ernest likely hadn't anticipated my preparedness, but this marked the commencement of my real retaliation. Facing him with a smirk, I explained my long-standing lack of trust in someone who discriminated against his own daughter and expressed my exhaustion with constant criticism. I disclosed my decision to divorce him, clarifying that I had been contemplating it for a while, waiting for the opportune moment. Seizing on his earlier mention of divorce, I handed him the papers, urging him to file quickly if he desired freedom. Initially dismissing it as a joke, Ernest reacted angrily when confronted with the reality of divorce. My anger peaked as he attempted to downplay the situation. Unperturbed, I insisted he accept the divorce papers, emphasizing the incomprehensible principles behind his actions. Threatening legal consultation, Ernest reluctantly received the papers, still claiming it was all a jest. Concerned about potential retaliation, I swiftly left the house, submitting the divorce papers to the city court. I promptly informed Christina about the outrageous behavior, and she too expressed fury. She condemned her father's actions and offered solace, suggesting that I stay at her apartment for a while. So, I made the decision to spend the night at Christina's place. That evening, we delved into discussions, meticulously planning our next moves against Ernest. About a week later, on holiday, Christina and I paid a visit to Ernest's house, the place I had called home until just a week prior, now feeling like a distant stranger's abode. Upon ringing the doorbell, Ernest swiftly emerged, adopting a condescending gaze as he questioned our purpose. He arrogantly assumed we had come to apologize for everything. Despite the infuriating condescension, I suppressed my anger and spoke in a meek, apologetic tone, claiming that I had indeed come to apologize for my wrongdoings. Christina, playing the role of a repentant daughter, echoed my sentiments. Oblivious to the theatrics, Ernest appeared genuinely pleased, believing we had come to our senses. However, his curiosity was piqued when he noticed the bags we carried, bags so full they were on the verge of bursting, tied up tightly to conceal their contents. From one of the bags, I extracted a bundle of actual $10,000 bills. Expressing remorse for my actions, I offered him some of my late husband's insurance money, urging him to use it to live in the luxury apartment with Christina. I mentioned the $500,000 total and asked him to keep it safe. Ernest's eyes gleamed at the sight of the money, and he eagerly agreed to safeguard it. He led us into the house without hesitation. Despite having left just a week earlier, the place was in disarray, with laundry and garbage scattered about. Suppressing laughter, I imagined Ernest's struggle to maintain the house on his own. Christina and I placed the bag's contents into the safe, excluding the $10,000 bundle. Fortunately, when Ernest went to the kitchen to make coffee, he remained oblivious to our actions. After returning to Christina's apartment, I grabbed the bags and left for a new place on my own. Christina bid me farewell with a smile, assuring me she would contact me once she was settled. 2 days later, while I was peacefully asleep in my new residence, Ernest called, inquiring about the $500,000. I chuckled heartily, realizing that he had taken longer than expected to notice. Ernest had fallen for our trap. The bags mostly contained just newspapers, cleverly arranged to create the illusion of holding $500,000. I had only prepared $110,000 from the bank to make Ernest believe my ruse. After depositing that money back into my account, it was no longer in my possession. If Ernest had probed further and asked to see inside the bags, I intended to reveal the truth, asserting that such an incredible deal couldn't possibly be genuine. However, deceived by just the $10,000, Ernest had been completely fooled. I had only prepared $110,000 from the bank to make Ernest believe me. After depositing that money back into my account, it was no longer in my possession. If Ernest had probed further and asked to see inside the bags, I intended to reveal the truth, asserting that such an incredible deal couldn't possibly be genuine. However, deceived by just the $10,000, Ernest had been completely fooled. Until now, you did terrible things to Christina and me, so I thought it was only fair to retaliate like this. If you want to resent someone, resent your past self, not me, I calmly stated. Ernest, looking troubled, began to plead, admitting his faults and asking me to return. Shocked by his selfish reasoning, I firmly rejected his proposal. I'm not an ATM or your housekeeper. You're an adult, handle it yourself. Besides, I'm in France now. This isn't just a vacation, it's an overseas transfer for work. I decided to divorce you and start a new life abroad. I revealed, explaining my decision to pursue my dreams and escape from him. Ernest, perplexed by the news, questioned why I hadn't informed him earlier. I dismissed his query, stating that we were practically strangers now, working in different departments. Furthermore, I revealed that Christina would contact him the next day through a messaging app. The following day, amidst the early hours due to the time difference, I initiated a video call through the messaging app with Ernest and Christina. Christina began expressing her sentiments, reminiscing about her childhood adoration for Ernest, but quickly transitioning to her current disdain. "You completely dismissed my career choice. That's when I saw your true nature. You just wanted to control me. There was no love. Now, I hate you and never want to see you again. This call is the last time we'll speak. I'm cutting ties," Christina declared firmly, leaving Ernest visibly distressed. Unexpectedly calm, Ernest pleaded for her understanding, seemingly assuming Christina would always adore him. However, Christina remained resolute, urging him to reflect on his actions. She then informed him that she had moved, advising him not to attempt to locate her new address through investigators or any other means. Adding to her announcement, I informed Ernest that I had informed his workplace, relatives, and parents about the reasons for our divorce, ensuring transparency about our decision. With that, the call concluded, leaving Ernest to reflect on the consequences of his actions. After ending the video call with Christina, I mirrored her actions, ignoring Ernest's pleading apologies. His remorse no longer held any significance to me. Christina expressed a sense of relief, feeling liberated after voicing her true feelings. Executing our plan brought a semblance of satisfaction, especially witnessing the impact it had on Ernest. In the aftermath, Ernest faced consequences at various fronts. He became uncomfortable at work and eventually resigned. Disowned by relatives and parents, he had to abandon the luxury apartment purchase. His disruptive actions even led to a scene at Christina's workplace, resulting in a ban for entering. Ernest's selfish choices resulted in a cascade of losses, and he retreated into a reclusive existence at home. Attempts to contact him for work-related matters were in vain. When a colleague finally visited his house, they encountered a disheveled Ernest with a wild beard, lifeless face, and a nauseating odor emanating from his abode. His once home had transformed into a ghostly garbage dump. Observing Ernest's miserable life, I couldn't help but think that he was reaping what he sowed. Meanwhile, I found happiness in my new life abroad, overcoming cultural barriers with careful communication and relishing the use of my French skills. The decision to transfer overseas proved to be a rewarding one. Christina, thriving in her career as an illustrator, had been entrusted with significant projects. In our phone conversations, she conveyed her satisfaction, emphasizing the joy of pursuing her passion. As a parent, witnessing my daughter shine in her chosen path brought immense gratification. Despite the challenges and adversities, both Christina and I emerged from the ordeal radiant and fulfilled in our respective lives. The journey, though tumultuous, affirmed that we had made the right choices, and the pursuit of our dreams had led to a brighter and more gratifying existence.
Sorry, big sis, not only did I snag a husband, but I also got a home. Ha, I'm grateful. My sister beamed as she uttered those devilish words, but her smile wouldn't last for long. The dream family home and the blissful life I had longed for were ripped away by my own sister. My foolish husband, who abandoned his family for her, will find no happiness in his future. For the sake of my daughter, I decided to stand up and face this challenge head-on. My name is Sarah, 33 years old. My husband, Ted, is 35, and our daughter, Maya, is about to turn 5. Ted and I met at work. Though we were in different departments, we grew close through mutual friends and eventually got married. Recently, something wonderful happened. Despite juggling work, childcare, and housework, we finally acquired the house we had always dreamed of. We painstakingly chose the design and decorations together, even picking out the color for Maya's room. Our whole family was excited to start life in our new home. But then, that incident happened. "Wow, it's spacious and beautiful," said my identical twin sister, Yumi, during a sudden visit. Although Yumi and I look alike, our personalities couldn't be more different. She's outgoing and adapts to everything with ease, while I'm shy and prefer reading books to socializing. Back in school, she used to bring her friends to my classroom just to mock me. "You two look alike, but you're so different. Yumi is cuter, right?" her friends would say, glancing at me, the plain one with thick glasses. Yumi would happily respond, "It's like I got all the good features at birth." Sorry, big sis. It's a past I'd rather forget. That's why we hardly spoke after becoming adults. I hadn't even told her about the new house, yet here she was, unexpectedly excited. I heard from Mom that you built a house, so I wanted to give you a housewarming gift. That's why I asked for your address, she said. What housewarming gift? I thought, bewildered. As if reading my mind, Yumi answered with a laugh. Oh, of course, that's a lie. Why would I bother giving you something like that? At home or school, she would call me sister, but when we were alone, she always referred to me as you. Her meanness was unchanged, making me sigh. Well then, since the tour is over, could you leave? My husband and daughter will be back soon, and I need to prepare lunch. Today was a holiday, and my husband and daughter were due back from playing in the nearby park. We planned to have lunch together as a family. Oh, then I'll wait. I'll have lunch with you and then leave, Yumi said. Lunch together? Impossible. Absolutely impossible, I thought. I only prepared enough for the three of us. Give me your share then. You are the big sister, after all, she said shamelessly. Even after turning 30, she still referred to herself as the little sister, making vulgar remarks that left me speechless. After all, I was only born a few minutes earlier than her. I'm home, Maya's voice echoed as she opened the living room door. My daughter, accompanied by my husband, walked in and was surprised to see her aunt. She looks just like Mom, Maya said, not knowing her aunt was my twin. My sister greeted them with a friendly smile and a warm hello. I'm Yumi, the twin sister. Nice to meet you, Ted. Sorry to intrude, Yumi added. Ted, having heard about my sister, was surprised to see her there but seemed pleased. Yumi, with her long eyelashes, distinct colored eyes, and perfect makeup, looked younger than her actual age. Her hair was curled, and she dressed to accentuate her figure. Meanwhile, I had spent the weekend in pajamas, my hair casually tied up and messy, with a tired face, no makeup, and thick glasses. It was clear that my sister appeared more beautiful and charming. Unable to assert myself in front of Maya, we ended up having lunch together. My sister ignored Maya, kept talking to Ted, and laughed loudly. Ted, you're so funny and stylish. Handsome too. You must be popular. So, why with my sister? She said, looking back and forth between Ted and me. My husband is sociable, fashionable, and popular at work with a bright personality. He was naive in relationships as I was his first, so he was easily deceived by my sister. No, not at all. I'm not popular. Why, you're the cute and popular one, Ted stammered. What a high school-like exchange. It was unpleasant. My much-anticipated holiday turned into a series of tolerances. Oh me, I'm not popular at all. I always attract weird guys, Yumi said. I recently broke up with my boyfriend, who I had been living with. He was short-tempered, and we fought a lot. I'm thinking of moving out since it's too big for just me and the rent is high. She glanced at me with a sly grin. Hey, you have a spare room here, right? Can I stay for a bit, just until I find a new place? No way. I was astounded by her audacity. What are you saying? Of course, that's out of the question. Don't just come here and make unreasonable demands. I couldn't hold back any longer. We can't just let this spiral out of control. I interjected, my voice tinged with desperation. We should help in difficult times, but this isn't right. She showed up out of nowhere, met my family for the first time, and now expects to stay over? Absolutely not. Once dinner is over, she needs to go home immediately. My anger simmered as I pushed away from the table and left the room. Yumi, unfazed, smiled and said, well, we can get to know each other better from now on. After a few visits, we'll become friends. I'll come by again. I could barely believe my ears. The thought of her returning felt like a cruel joke. Once she finally left, I turned to Ted, my frustration boiling over. Why did you say she could stay? I've told you before, she doesn't understand boundaries. If we're kind to her, she'll take advantage and never leave. She won't help with anything and will expect to stay here for free. Ted shrugged. She didn't seem that bad. She's bright and energetic, maybe even nice. His words felt like a betrayal, and his enchanted demeanor only fueled my anger. Nice? How can someone who asks to stay in our home the first time they meet be a nice person? If she shows up when I'm not here, do not let her in, I demanded, my voice firm. Ted nodded, but his expression was dismissive. Okay, calm down. It's scary how jealous women can be, even sisters. He said this as if I were overreacting, and I could hardly believe it. Jealous? What are you talking about? She's been bullying me since we were kids. It's not complex, it's the truth. She always took my things, my toys, my clothes, everything. I've always been at her mercy. But instead of sympathy, Ted just gave me a bored and turned away. Disappointment washed over me. I never expected him to defend her over me. He lay down on the bed, indifferent, and I sighed, feeling the weight of his indifference. As the days passed, I buried myself in work, catching up on everything I'd missed during the move. My parents and Ted helped with Maya's daycare, which was a relief, but I still felt guilty for not being there as much as I wanted. I tried to make up for it on my days off, but Ted always seemed to have errands to run, leaving little time for the three of us to be together. One night, I came home exhausted from overtime and was greeted by an unwelcome voice. "Welcome back, big sister," Yumi said, her voice dripping with mockery. She was sitting in my living room, boldly drinking despite the promise not to let her in. It was 9:00 p.m., and my daughter was already asleep. The sight of Yumi, red-faced and clearly drunk, sent a wave of irritation through me. The table was a mess of beer, wine, and snacks. "Why are you here?" I demanded. "I told you I'd come back, didn't I? Besides, is it really okay to leave your husband and child alone until this late?" Yumi replied, feigning concern. Ted chimed in. "Her ex-boyfriend has been showing up at her place. Yumi's scared to go home." "Then why not go back to our parents' house?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. "No way. They'll just lecture me about getting a job and straightening out my life. I like it here, and Ted is here," Yumi said, gazing at my husband with a look that made my skin crawl. Ted, tipsy and oblivious, seemed pleased by her attention. "Fine. If you're going to sleep in the living room, at least clean up afterward. I'm going to take a bath and go to bed," I said, too exhausted to fight anymore. As I checked on Maya, who was sleeping peacefully, the sounds of laughter from the living room only deepened my irritation. I couldn't believe how foolish and distasteful it was to see my sister cozying up to my husband and him enjoying the attention in front of his own wife. I ran into one of Ted's colleagues in the bathroom. "Is Ted okay?" they asked. He mentioned he was taking a sick day this morning. Confused, I returned to the house. The living room was a mess, crumpled blankets and empty cups scattered around. And Yumi was sprawled on the sofa, sound asleep. Ted hadn't emerged from his room, which I assumed meant he was hungover from drinking too much. I took Maya to daycare and headed to work, feeling uneasy. At work, I made an excuse for my sudden day off. "Thanks for your concern. Sorry for taking the day off so abruptly," I said. The colleague responded, "It's okay, but it's odd. Ted's been taking a lot of days off lately and making more mistakes." That unsettling feeling from the previous night lingered. I decided to leave work early to check on things at home. As I approached, I steeled myself for what I might find. Quietly opening the front door, I walked into the living room and, just as I feared, found Ted and Yumi sitting closely on the sofa. Ted had his arms wrapped around her while they watched TV. Fury bubbled inside me. I flung open the door. "Sarah," Ted exclaimed, rising in surprise. Yumi, on the other hand, sat there with a smirk, clearly pleased with the scene. "Why are you here?" she asked, feigning innocence. "I heard you were sick, so I came back, worried. I'd also heard you've been taking a lot of days off lately. Are you having an affair with my sister while I've been working hard at covering for you? All those weekends you said you had plans. Was it to meet her?" Ted, looking panicked, raised his voice in defense. "Do you have any proof of us meeting? I hate your logical and critical attitude." "Proof?" I shot back. "I saw you hugging each other just now. That's what I can't stand about you, always looking down on me. From now on, you and Yumi can live here together, and I want you to leave." Ted's face twisted in frustration. "You're always busy, never paying attention to me. You don't even bother with makeup anymore, and you don't see me as a man. Yumi recognizes me as a man. She listens to me and compliments me." Yumi, leaning on Ted's arm, added with a smirk, "It's because you don't appreciate your husband. He built such a beautiful house for you and treats you kindly, yet you're always preoccupied with work or the kids." Their words stung. It seemed that ever since Yumi arrived, Ted had been taking more time off and becoming more involved with her, neglecting his family in the process. I was sickened by their disregard for our home and children. "But I'm glad you came back early," Yumi said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "I had planned to have a serious talk tonight. My lease was nearly up, and I intended to move my things over tomorrow." But my self-centered sister had other plans. Sorry, sis, she said with a carefree smile. Looks like I'll be taking your husband in your house. Her lack of remorse was infuriating. Ted continued with his excuses. I wanted Maya to live with us too, but Yumi is scared of suddenly becoming a mother, so you'll have to look after her for a while. His priorities were clear. He valued his own happiness over mine and our daughters. I understand, I replied, my voice cold as I headed upstairs, craving solitude. My sister's laughter echoed behind me, further fueling my anger. But hearing my daughter's name sharpened my focus. I needed to fight for her. Taking a deep breath, I composed myself and reached out to someone on my phone. It was time to show that I was no longer the person I used to be. 30 minutes later, the intercom buzzed. Mom, Dad, why are you here? I was taken aback to see my stern-faced parents at the front door. Ted and Yumi looked shocked as they stood in front of them. My sister, furious, confronted me. Did you tell Mom and Dad? How childish to run to them as an adult. Be quiet, I snapped back, trying to maintain my composure. What are you two doing? My father asked, his usually calm demeanor replaced with a formidable anger. We're discussing a divorce, my sister retorted. This has nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with us? My father said, his voice rising. Our granddaughter's husband is having an affair with her own sister. We're absolutely involved. What are you going to do about this, Ted? My father demanded. Ted fumbled for words. Oh, well? Ted, I'm disappointed in you, my father said sharply. I thought you were a reliable man who would protect Sarah, but here you are, engaged in such foolishness. Ted's surprise was evident, only reacting after my sister nudged him with her elbow. I'm sorry, but this is a matter between husband and wife, Ted said, sweating. It's not so much about who's at fault, but that our relationship just wasn't working out. Are you saying it's my fault? I asked incredulously. We never had these issues before Yumi came along. If that were the case, we wouldn't have built this house. That's your opinion, Ted retorted. You got promoted, pretended to be busy, neglected housework and childcare, and didn't even bother with makeup. You didn't respect me as your husband. Aren't you ashamed? So you didn't like that I got promoted? I shot back. My promotion and maternity leave hurt your pride, so you pretended to be calm and helped with housework and childcare to hide your bruised ego. You're petty. Respecting a husband doesn't mean you have to hold back your own success. You've seen what Sarah is like, Ted said. She's hardworking and doesn't wear makeup. My mother tried to intervene. I hardly wore makeup even before marriage. Where is the Ted who used to love and adore me? No, Ted said firmly. Parents have no right to interfere in a couple's affairs. Please go home and take Sarah with you. My sister coldly handed me the divorce papers. Ted has already prepared the divorce papers. Just respond to them as soon as possible. I'll send the rest of your stuff later. How could you, Yumi? My mother asked, trying to stop her. Please, let us be. My sister said, pushing us out of the house. We're getting divorced, aren't we? I turned to Ted. Is this really happening? He nodded, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Yes, he said. You're so clueless, I said, feeling the weight of the situation. I'm keeping the house since it's in my name, I said firmly. I'll pay child support, but let's finalize the divorce. However, there's one more thing. If we're getting divorced and I'm leaving, you'll need to repay the $400,000 my parents loaned us for the house. I held up the loan agreement, watching their faces turn pale. When we bought the house, we had paid $100,000 from our savings, with my parents covering the remaining $400,000. The loan agreement was already in place, and it was a better deal than a traditional loan. My parents had suggested this arrangement, and we had both been grateful. But since I'll be staying in the house, it's only fair that you repay it. What are you talking about? Ted stammered. We discussed this, and my parents said it wasn't necessary to repay it. We're family. Family or not, we signed a loan agreement, I replied, my voice steady. It's unthinkable not to repay it. Our parents' money is important for their future. Just because we're family doesn't mean you can borrow money and not pay it back. Was your gratitude a lie? This is unacceptable to our parents who trusted you. Ted tried to argue. My father said not to worry about it. If we have more children, it would be hard to repay, so I thought it might be considered a gift. That's not how it works, my father said, his anger palpable. Even if that's true, I have no intention of giving a single penny to someone who has an affair with his wife's sister and abandons his own daughter and grandchild. Pay it back properly. Yumi, who had been listening silently, finally spoke up. I'm also a daughter. It shouldn't be a problem if I stay here. I'm not working right now, and I don't have the money. Be quiet, my father cut her off. You're no longer a daughter to me. You've always bullied Sarah, and now, as an adult, you're doing this. I'm cutting ties with you. They'll never show up again. My parents had long been aware of my sister's attitude, but her behavior had not changed one bit. Even as an adult, she still acted like a spoiled child. Since Yumi wasn't working and would struggle on her own, I decided to press for additional compensation. Since you're the reason for the divorce, you should pay me alimony for the mental distress. I'll have my lawyer contact you. Ted was left speechless, staring in shock. I grabbed my suitcases and walked out, my mother's tears stinging my eyes. Sarah, I'm so sorry for all this, she said, hugging me tightly. I never thought Yumi would go this far. I shouldn't have told her where you live. Mom, it's not your fault. Her nature can't be changed, I reassured her. It's refreshing to cut ties with her. I've also realized that Ted is just as self-centered as she is. I have no regrets now. I'm sorry for involving you, I said. Thank you for coming. I'll find a lawyer and make sure to recover the money. But for now, don't worry about the money. You and Maya come first. You must be exhausted today. Go pick up Maya, come back home, and rest. My mother nodded, her concern for me evident. Take care of yourself, she said. We'll handle this together. Feeling both mentally and physically exhausted, I decided to take a break at my parents' house. Their warm support was a comforting embrace during such a difficult time. I expressed my gratitude, telling them how much their encouragement meant to me. Their unwavering support gave me the strength to move forward. A few days later, I reached out to a lawyer who was a friend of my father's. I needed to address compensation for emotional distress, the repayment of the money my parents had loaned us, and of course, child support for Maya. Although I was concerned about the potential impact on my career, the news of my husband's affair with his sister-in-law and our impending divorce had quickly spread, leading to his social isolation. I took a leave of absence from work to handle the address change and other divorce-related tasks. Thankfully, since I had kept my maiden name at work, there was no need for a name change after the divorce, which was a relief. My husband called me once, accusing me of turning everyone against him. Did you talk to my boss? You must have painted me as the bad guy, he said. Well, I heard your boss's wife cheated on him, and now they're divorced. Maybe that's why your boss has been so tough on you. Do you finally understand how unreasonable you are and the trouble you cause others? After saying my piece, I hung up the phone. Later, I learned that my husband had quit his job. I was relieved not to have to see him anymore. With no job and having used our savings to buy a house, he and my sister were forced to sell the property. Fortunately, they found a buyer quickly and repaid the money they owed my parents sooner than expected. However, they still face alimony and child support payments. Finding a new job proved challenging for him at his age, and he and my sister ended up living with his parents. Yet she remained unchanged, still refusing to help with housework or seek employment, only indulging in her own desires. His parents, exhausted by the situation, eventually asked him to leave. After the divorce, my ex-in-laws came to apologize. I couldn't help but feel a sense of irony and satisfaction when they finally moved out. My sister had once come to my parents asking for money, but my father had scolded her so harshly that she never returned. She had lost her former charm and was now marked by poverty and an unhealthy lifestyle. My husband, who sought a divorce, found himself stuck with my sister, who clung to him out of spite rather than love. Their loveless and impoverished life was easy to imagine. I had planned to find a new home for my daughter and me, but my parents advised me to take my time. We lived with them for a while, and my daughter's smile gradually returned, surrounded by their love. Thanks to their support, I excelled at work and was appointed leader of a new department. Mom, you're amazing. You work so hard. I want to be a great woman like you, my daughter said, which was the greatest reward for my efforts. With my daughter's love and my parents' support, I regained my confidence and vowed to keep striving to be a mother she could respect. On the day we were set to embark on our honeymoon, I was blindsided when Daniel handed me divorce papers instead. He announced, with a chilling detachment, that he was taking his entire family on what was supposed to be our trip. Coldly, he added, "If you have a problem with it, we can just go our separate ways." Internally, I was fuming, but I kept my composure and calmly responded, "Fine, but don't forget, I'm still my own person." His shocked expression gave me a fleeting sense of victory. "My name is Samantha. I'm 37 years old, and I work in real estate, a career I genuinely love and find fulfilling. I'm fortunate to have supportive colleagues, but despite my professional success, my personal life feels stagnant. I don't have any hobbies, and I've never had a boyfriend before Daniel." A growing concern had been weighing on me as I watched most of my friends marry in their 30s. I was one of the few still single, and it didn't help that my younger colleagues were progressively leaving the company, which left me with a pang of loneliness. Then, through a mutual friend, I met Daniel. He was 3 years younger than me, with a comforting smile that immediately drew me in. He didn't talk much. He preferred to listen, but he always made sure my opinions were valued whenever decisions had to be made. Having no prior experience in relationships, I quickly grew attached to him. As our relationship evolved, I brought up the idea of marriage, and Daniel agreed without hesitation. Marriage is a huge commitment. It's planning a wedding, a honeymoon, building a new home together. I was eager for us to make these decisions jointly, but Daniel always deferred to me, never sharing his preferences. Over time, this made him feel distant, less reliable. My dissatisfaction with him began to grow, especially when his mother came into the picture. Daniel's mother was nothing like him. Where he was easygoing, she was overbearing, rarely considering my views and often imposing her own. "Samantha, once you're married, you'll quit your job and focus on the home, right? You're not getting any younger. If you wait too long, you'll have trouble having kids," she remarked during one of our first meetings. "Daniel is working hard, so as a woman, you should concentrate on the family. It's a wife's duty to support her husband." She adhered to such outdated beliefs. Ironically, I earned more than Daniel, something he didn't mind but had mentioned to his parents. His mother, however, looked down on this. "A woman who earns more than a man isn't charming. Can you even manage household chores? A wife should cook, do laundry, clean, and take care of her husband's health. Can you do that?" she challenged, clearly underestimating me. Contrary to her assumptions, I had been living independently for years, managing all my household tasks without any issue. I had no intention of quitting my job after marriage either. I wanted to maintain a balance between my personal and professional life, but whenever his mother criticized me, Daniel remained silent. He didn't defend me, just nodded along with her. This planted seeds of doubt about his ability to stand up for me or be a reliable partner. His lack of support left me feeling uneasy about our future. I questioned whether I could truly rely on him when it mattered. Despite him being younger, I had hoped he might grow into a more dependable partner with time. But a part of me feared that if this marriage didn't work, I might never get married at all. My mind was in constant turmoil, torn between anxiety and longing, all while time moved forward without mercy. As the wedding preparations continued, from selecting a honeymoon destination to figuring out time off from work, my to-do list only grew, adding to my mounting unease. It was as if the more I tried to move forward, the heavier the weight of everything became. One day, I decided to discuss our plans with Daniel. Considering our busy work schedules, I brought up the idea of timing our honeymoon carefully. This might be our only chance to take a long vacation. Should we plan the honeymoon during this time? I asked. "Yeah, that sounds good to me," Daniel replied without much thought. It seemed like a rare opportunity, as both of us would be free from work simultaneously. However, the wedding venue I had always dreamed of was so popular that it was fully booked for over a year. Faced with this dilemma, I proposed an unconventional solution. "What do you think about having the honeymoon before the wedding?" I suggested. I looked into it, and some couples do that. If we wait to have the wedding first, it could be another 3 years before we can go on this trip. "If you're okay with it, Samantha, then I'm fine with it too," Daniel said without hesitation. His easy agreement gave me a sense of relief, but it also left me feeling conflicted. While part of me appreciated the lack of opposition, I wished he would share his own thoughts more often. His constant acceptance of my ideas felt bittersweet, as if he wasn't really invested. Still, I was glad that we could move forward without any disagreements, so I pressed ahead with planning our honeymoon and wedding. After much consideration, we settled on Europe as our destination. I had been torn between Florida and Europe right up until the last minute. Florida was closer, but I figured we could visit it anytime. The allure of Italy and Spain was too strong to resist. I was eager to wander through their beautiful streets, savor delicious food, and indulge in shopping for stylish accessories and unique tableware to celebrate the start of our new life together. Once our schedules and destinations were aligned, I finalized all the arrangements about a month before our departure. By that time, my excitement was at its peak. This would be my first overseas trip, and I was buzzing with enthusiasm, my mind filled with thoughts of Europe. From buying travel essentials to planning our activities, I was entirely consumed by the thrill of what lay ahead. In the midst of all this excitement, any lingering frustrations I had with Daniel seemed to fade away. Everything was falling into place, until just a week before our honeymoon, Daniel brought up something unexpected. It was rare for him to make any requests, so I was immediately intrigued, wondering if it might have something to do with our trip. Maybe he had found a specific place he wanted to visit in Paris. Filled with curiosity, I waited for him to speak. I asked him, "What's on your mind, Daniel?" Quite innocently, he made his request. "I want to visit Finch Melody Auditorium while we're in Paris. Mom wants to go there." I was taken aback. "Your mother? Wait, what do you mean?" I stammered, struggling to process this sudden change in our plans. To Daniel, it seemed like an obvious addition. "Well, since everyone else is going," he explained as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I felt a wave of disbelief as I grappled with the realization that my honeymoon was being turned into a family vacation. "We'll all be together during the trip, right?" Daniel said casually, as if this bombshell wasn't shattering everything I had envisioned. "What do you mean by everyone?" I asked, confused. "It's our honeymoon. It should just be the two of us." Daniel remained unfazed. "My mom thinks it's normal for the whole family to come along." I was floored. "Daniel, I only made reservations for two. Just you and me. The booking deadline was a week ago. Today's the last day to confirm our plans, and I've only registered us," I said, trying to keep my composure. "It might still be possible for the whole family to join. If you talk to the travel agency, it might sort something out," Daniel suggested, his optimism almost infuriating. Before I could respond, the intercom buzzed. On the screen, I saw my in-laws standing outside with several bags. Without waiting for an invitation, they barged into the house. My mother-in-law's eyes gleamed with excitement as she announced, "I thought I'd drop off the luggage here since we're leaving soon. I'm so excited." Daniel quickly took control of the situation, ignoring my mounting frustration. "Just leave the luggage here," he said, leading them into the room as if this was completely normal. "Wait a minute," I interjected, desperately trying to halt the chaos. But my mother-in-law shot me a sharp look. "What's the matter, Samantha? I hope you're not saying you don't want us all to go together now," she challenged, her tone condescending. "I never agreed to this in the first place," I retorted, my voice firm. She dismissed me with a wave of her hand. "You heard her, she just said no," she stated, as if my objections were of no consequence. Then turning to Daniel, she coaxed him further. "But you always thought we would go together, right?" "Yeah," Daniel replied simply, supporting his mother's assumption without hesitation. My mother-in-law seized on his agreement, her smug smile growing. "It's completely normal for the husband's parents to go on the honeymoon. Don't you have any common sense?" Her words left me questioning everything, not just the trip, but the very foundation of my relationship with Daniel. As the tension escalated, she attempted to smooth things over with a troubling statement that only deepened my doubts. "I hope you won't ruin the trip with any unpleasantness. It's a special honeymoon, after all. And we all want to make good memories, right?" my mother-in-law said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I'll make sure to teach you some common sense this week before we leave." She spoke as if it were a given that she and the rest of the family would be joining us. I felt my frustration boiling over. "This is a honeymoon, you know. Normally, it's just the husband and wife," I countered, refusing to back down. I knew that if I gave in to her demands now, it would set a terrible precedent for our future. I was determined not to let that happen. But she remained unyielding, dismissing my concerns outright. "The husband's parents joining the honeymoon is just common sense. I can't believe you don't want to be with us. I thought we were becoming a family, but it seems our ideas of common sense are different. You don't seem to like me, and nothing seems to match." "How sad," she lamented with exaggerated disappointment, her tone tinged with insincerity. Her furrowed brows and words, "How sad," seemed laced with a hidden smirk. convincing me she was deliberately manipulating the situation. To my dismay, Daniel sided with her without hesitation. "Samantha, what's wrong with you? They're my parents. It's okay for them to come on the honeymoon, right?" "It's not possible," I declared firmly, my patience wearing thin. "We've already booked reservations for 2. Plus, I've never heard of families joining the honeymoon trip." Daniel's response was heated, as if itching for a confrontation. "I never realized you disliked my parents so much, Samantha," he exclaimed, his voice rising in disbelief. Then, coldly dismissing the conversation, he added, "That's enough. Just leave for today," his gaze piercing, as if he couldn't fathom my stance. As his words hung in the air, a sly smile spread across my mother-in-law's face. I stood there, bewildered and hurt, wondering why Daniel always sided with her, especially in such a crucial moment. The door slammed shut behind me, and in that fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of her smug expression, a look that celebrated her victory. Alone, standing outside, I felt utterly abandoned. My heart ached as I wondered how I had been painted as the villain in this scenario, why this special trip, meant to be ours, was now on the verge of being ruined. Overwhelmed by frustration and sadness, tears began to stream down my face. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "I want you to check if it's still possible for my parents to join the tour. If not, we'll cancel this trip and find one that all of us can go on. Please think rationally and reconsider. We can sort this out if you do." His words stung, devoid of any acknowledgement of my feelings. Instead, there was only a cold insistence on his version of rationality. He didn't contact me again after that message, and as time passed, the distance between us only grew wider. I could sense that Daniel was likely just as upset as I was, though he hid it well. The day of our supposed honeymoon finally arrived, and despite everything, I had no intention of enjoying it. But after a month of preparations, I couldn't just walk away. As I was getting ready, the intercom buzzed. It was Daniel, here to pick me up. We hadn't seen each other since that heated argument, and I wasn't sure how to act around him. His arrival suggested he still intended to go on the trip, but there was something off. He had no luggage with him. Instead, he was holding a set of divorce papers in his hand. "You still plan to go on this trip after hurting my parents, didn't you?" he accused, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I'm taking my whole family on this honeymoon. If you don't like it, let's get a divorce." His words hit me like a brick, cold, final, and with no room for compromise. It was clear that in Daniel's eyes, his familial ties outweighed our relationship, and his mother's influence was the deciding factor. I stood there, caught between heartbreak and disbelief, realizing my marriage was ending before it had even begun. Daniel thrust the divorce papers toward me, his tone chilling. "My mom said it would be better this way." In that moment, everything became crystal clear. I had always thought Daniel would listen to me, value my feelings, and show me kindness. But now I saw him for what he was, someone who lacked conviction and placed his family's desires above our relationship. My feelings for him cooled sharply as I grasped the reality of our situation. Marrying him seemed pointless, especially with his overbearing mother in the picture. The future I saw with them was one filled with endless compromises and constant interference. Determined, I pointed at the divorce papers he held and responded with a decisiveness that took him aback. "Sure," I said, my voice unwavering, "but remember, I'm still single." "Single? What do you mean?" Daniel looked genuinely confused, his earlier composure slipping. "Weren't you listening? We talked about delaying the marriage registration until the day of the ceremony. I made sure to get your agreement. You didn't forget, did you? The marriage certificate is still in the drawer. You even said, 'If you're fine with it, Samantha, then I'm fine too.' That's right, divorce or not, we're not even married yet, so there's no problem with me going on the honeymoon under my maiden name." For a brief moment, Daniel's face flickered with recognition before turning crimson with frustration. "Are you out of your mind? You're giving up on marriage just because of a honeymoon. Get a grip," he exclaimed, his tone rising. Matching his intensity, I responded firmly, "No, Daniel. I'm giving up on you because you've already made it clear where your priorities lie." I stood my ground, unwavering. "This is the result of me being rational," I said firmly. "You've shown where your priorities lie, and I have to protect my interests and well-being. This wasn't just about a trip, it was about standing up for myself and my autonomy in a relationship that was turning into a web of conditional terms and unreasonable expectations." I realized that I had been so eager to get married that I lost sight of the reality I was stepping into. I can be happy with someone who doesn't respect my opinions or support me, I continued, my voice steady. I'd rather stay single for life. Thanks for helping me see that haste truly does make waste. Daniel's expression softened as his voice wavered. Samantha, let's calm down and start over, okay? He pleaded, his eyes almost brimming with tears. But I wasn't swayed. My resolve had solidified. I was determined to break free. In a moment of clarity, I raised my voice. If you're so desperate for a family trip, why don't you go with your family of 3? This time, plan it all yourself from the reservations to the itinerary. After always relying on others, it's about time you understand how difficult it is. If you think you can handle it, go ahead. Take the reins, you indecisive man. Without hesitation, I pulled out the unsigned marriage certificate from the drawer and tore it into shreds right in front of him. His mouth fell open in shock, his face a mix of disbelief and panic. Do you understand how serious I am now? I asked, my voice unwavering. I refuse to have a future dictated by others. It's over between us. Go cry to your beloved mommy, you mama's boy. I turned and slammed the front door behind me, leaving the stunned Daniel in the silence of his own making. I could almost picture him running to his mother, seeking comfort and validation. That evening, I contacted the tour company to cancel our honeymoon reservations. Even though it was a last-minute cancellation and I faced a financial loss, the sense of liberation, knowing I had made a decision for my well-being, was worth every penny. Afterward, I decided to bill Daniel for the entire cost of the trip. It was his actions, after all, that led to this fiasco. It only seemed fair. Later, Daniel tried to shift the blame for our failed relationship onto me, spreading rumors among our friends and coworkers. But his attempts backfired. Among our circle, he quickly earned a reputation as a mama's boy, a label that stuck thanks to his past behavior. His bid for sympathy didn't gain him much favor. When I told my parents about the divorce, they were initially surprised but quickly supportive. Marriage isn't the only path to happiness, they reminded me. As long as you're happy, that's all that matters. Their words were a great comfort during such a turbulent time. On a brighter note, this ordeal reignited my passion for travel. Instead of letting the honeymoon go to waste, I decided to take my first solo trip. Traveling alone to overseas destinations was daunting at first, but it turned out to be incredibly fulfilling. I visited historic cities I had always dreamed of, and to my surprise, I found that I enjoyed the solitude. These solo adventures opened up a new realm of freedom and discovery for me. I began to love traveling on my terms, and now, I'm eagerly planning my next trip abroad. This new chapter of my life is one where I'm no longer defined by marriage or controlled by others' expectations. Instead, I'm embracing a life of exploration, of the world, and of myself.